I'll start with Greg. You're gonna sit down and be like, I'm gonna do this. You jump on stuff. Let's get it.
All right. We will convene, and I believe we were at the point where you were available for questions by the commission. Sir. Yes.
Thank you both for coming. And so my questions are largely going to pertain to the deaf interpreters. When did you become aware that a number of the victims and families were deaf?
My first knowledge was long before I ended up at the FAC. It was actually when I went to the Central Maine Medical Center. My detectives attempted to interview someone and discovered that they were deaf. So that interview stopped, and that was my first.
And what accommodations then were made to interview folks?
After, my understanding is we did not do that interview tonight. My understanding after that, law enforcement was paired up with interpreters, and those interviews happened.
Human people, not tablets.
I had not heard about tablets until today. So yes, ma'am, humans.
Were you ever made aware that some ASL interpreters were turned away from both CMMC and the Armory when they showed up to assist with interpretation? That was part of the information that was passed on to this commission when the victims spoke to us publicly.
I know that for the FAC part, there was established teams that were vetted, established leadership teams that were there with their staff. So I can envision, I just assume that if people would try to introduce that weren't vetted, that that weren't part of those teams, that there may have been a deconfliction that happened. That I think that would probably be the only scenario I could envision.
Just a couple of quick things. So, when you say there, the FAC was open to the public, what does that mean? So obviously not anyone was walking in, right?
That's correct. So there was a set criteria. My understanding is that the FBI had a certain criteria, and that criteria was vetted by the stakeholders, and we all agreed that it would be people that were directly affected to the incident. And anyone who came for services and did not meet that criteria were referred to the Ramada Inn, which was a much more robust acceptance. They would take anybody in that needed services.
And my last thing is just a very, very quick comment, and that is that, you know, it'll be a suggestion of mine, just because we did get information back from victims who, the deaf community, some of whom were victims, some of whom were interpreters, about some problems that they experienced. They were unique, you know, and hard to foresee, arguably, but they were unique to that community, to reach out and to kind of piece that together so that just for your own future working understanding.
Thank you. We appreciate that, and we will definitely we will do it better next time. Promise.
Hopefully there will be. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, who's actually making the assignments of victim witness coordinators to particular victims?
That would have been left up to the district attorney's office and the AG's office, ma'am.
And who was,
Could you speak up, please?
Yes, sir.
you keep referring to the Ramada Inn, but they weren't making any victim witness determination. Who was at the Ramada Inn?
No, my understanding, I don't have any knowledge about really what was happening in the Ramada Inn. But we were advised that that was a standalone, if you will, an FAC for people that were not directly identified as victims of the tragedy.
Where your FAC partners had set up another.
No, this was other community-based stakeholders, is my understanding.
And does the state police have its own victim witness coordinators, or are you relying upon the district attorney's offices?
The latter, ma'am. Yes, we rely on the district attorneys and the attorney general's office.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And just help me to be a little confident. Who decided we need to set up FAC?
The FAC model is a nationwide accepted model, and the FBI, is my understanding, the FBI, when they came, they made the recommendation that they have the team, they have the training. That is the.
So really, the idea generated from the FBI in this particular instance.
Yes, sir.
Have
That's
you
correct.
folks ever utilized an FAC for any previous situations before?
We have not. We have followed that model of needs assessments and such with our smaller investigations, but as far as an FAC formally, we have never, in my understanding, we have never done this before.
And there was no liaison with MEMA because they have done work on FACs before, planning anyway. So was there any discussion of working collaboration with them? Because that's where.
Not at my level, sir. No.
No,
Dan, can I just ask a couple questions?
sure.
Well, during the course of our work with various victims, there were a couple phrases that they mentioned that were bothersome. The first was the description on on the standard evidence return sheet when people were returning items to the surviving family members. And each time on those sheets, once it's signed off, like the receipt, it's signed off, the bottom of the receipt, the bottom of the report says nothing further that people need to sign off on. Is that a standard term used in these provisions or in evidence collection? And could you come up with a different phrase, God forbid this were to ever happen again?
So the return of property is part of the victim service unit from the FBI. That's not our form. And they were the ones that were responsible for collecting, organizing, and identifying, and then returning to family members. So we're not familiar with their form. And I don't recall anything like that on our particular evidence forms.
Would you be willing to make a suggestion to the FBI that perhaps they should reconsider the use of nothing further in that in this kind of setting?
Certainly, absolutely. And I also know that there's a difference, and I don't know if this correlates or not, difference. They were very strict on evidence and personal effects. That those were not interchangeable terms. So I don't know if this was an evidence return, part of their criminal investigation, or if it was a personal effects return. So,
Personal effects return
Personal
for one
effects.
particular family, yeah.
okay, yes,
I remember that distinctly, okay.
yes, Mike, I am in contact with my counterpart quite regularly with the FBI. We've developed a relationship, so I can mention that. I'd be happy to.
The other issue that was raised by some victims was the use of the first night. My understanding is correctly, persons at the scene were first brought to the armory so that you could make sure you had everybody, knew who was there, injuries, needs. And then they were bused to middle school in Auburn. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, ma'am. I wasn't part of that, part of the operation yet, so I believe that's correct.
One of the issues raised by certain victims was at that location where they were bused to so that their family members come pick them up was the use of the phrase family reunification center. And that certain victims were never reunified. And is there a way that particular center, you could change the term on that phrase?
Yes, I think that's a very simple change. I knew preparing for this, that term had been used and that there were some sensitivity issues related to that. All I can say is we do apologize for causing any further stress on victims or their families.
And finally, during your time while you were working with the FBI, were you made aware of the Department of Justice long-term victim services funding that's available for up to 2 years?
I was not directly. No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Yeah,
With the Family Assistance Center, and other places, people go there to get information and things like that. And because the city was on lockdown, people couldn't get there as readily as they could to get information. So I think that led to a lot of social media stuff, kind of like, and that's how family found out someone died because of that. Was there some discussion about how to craft a message and get people out, because obviously sounds like you need a physical place, but you may need a virtual forum for people to get information. Was that discussed?
Sure. Press releases.
Yeah, I think that could be incorporated more with our larger press releases or the more pronounced press releases to refer them somewhere. And something we would certainly look into. We'd be concerned about, particularly during an investigation, criminal investigation, manhunt, on how much information we're giving out. We don't want to, it would have to be a secure site, which can be done easily. I think that would probably be the best way to move forward, but we'll certainly take that suggestion.
I think further, I'll just make one comment that I'm sure you folks have seen it or heard it. But the victim witness advocates that were part of your project, they have been universally declared to be really outstanding in terms of the victims that we've heard from. We have some more, but everyone they were real godsends to the families. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And we will call on Lieutenant Stevenson and Sergeant Roy. Good afternoon, gentlemen, and you can begin by introducing yourself.
Sure, I'll go first. My name is Tyler Stevenson. I'm a lieutenant with the state police. I've been in law enforcement 24 years. I started with the National Park Service in 2000 and worked law enforcement for them until 2005. I came back home to Maine and been with the state police ever since. During my career with the state police, I've been obviously a trooper, a sergeant, and now a lieutenant. I was a canine handler and on the TAC team for 10 years and ran the TAC team for my last 3 years before turning over to Sergeant Roy here.
My name is Gregory Roy. I'm a sergeant with the state police. I've been on the state police since 2009. Started with the Troop J field troop up in Hancock, Washington counties for 6 years up there. Spent 7 years in our major crimes. And I've been full-time with our special services unit for the last 2 years. I've been on the tactical team for 12 years, served 3 years as an assistant commander before taking over the team in 2020 as the tactical team commander.
Okay, if you would, you could begin to tell us about your participation in this particular incident.
Sure, I'll start it off, but Sergeant Roy is gonna do the lion's share of the talking, which is a benefit for you. I forgot to mention, I'm the special service lieutenant, so I oversee our specialties, which are the TAC team, the big ones, TAC team, K9, dive team, bomb team. I have the governor's protection detail. And obviously, the nature of this call was going to require the use of a lot of our teams. Also, the crisis negotiators are part of that. And the TAC team specifically is a team designed, trained, and equipped by policy to handle the high-risk situations, high-risk incidents in Maine. And I think everyone agrees that what occurred in Lewiston was a high-risk incident. So that's how kind of we got the ball rolling with the TAC team involved with this particular incident.
Great. So I'll go through a tactical operations briefing. And I just want to clarify that this is going to go over what happened regarding tactical teams and the high-risk operations that we conducted. But there was a lot more work being done on the patrol level, sorting out lower risk type operations. So this is not an all-inclusive of what was done in the management portion. So it started for me on the 25th, obviously, and I think it might be helpful because I'm going to use some different terms to describe tactical teams to kind of talk generally about what that is. But a tactical team is just another word for a SWAT team, something that probably most people are familiar with. And in the state of Maine, there's several, but we're a small enough community that we know each other. And some of them are referred to as special response teams, emergency services units, SWAT teams, tactical team. And so for the sake of this, they're pretty interchangeable. They have different jurisdictions and sometimes different capabilities, but generally that's what I'll be referring to here. Our team with the Maine State Police Tactical Team, we respond throughout the state to a variety of different high-risk incidents throughout the year. And we also rely on mutual aid for bigger, larger scale incidents. And we have relationships with the other teams in Maine, but we also have relationships with our, as you heard, NESPAC partners in New England. And that's regularly, gaining assistance from out-of-state police agencies and also providing assistance and traveling out of state to help with larger operations. This incident came to my attention around 7:20 p.m. on the 25th. And that was basically informal notifications from troopers throughout Maine calling me and just letting me know what had happened. So I started becoming aware of it. And shortly thereafter, I received the first formal notification from our major crimes unit, Sergeant Chris Farley, requesting that we respond. They didn't have a known location or a known mission at this time for us, but knowing that likely that would come up to respond in stage. So I activated my team and my team's resources to respond to Lewiston. From where I live, I have a little bit of a drive to Lewiston and began becoming aware of other teams responding to Lewiston, other state tactical teams. So I started using that time to reach out to them to try to organize the tactical response, knowing again that there were going to be a lot of resources coming in from all over the state. And this is the benefit of having a small body of SWAT teams in the state where we're all on a first name basis, and I can call their commanders and initiate that conversation well en route to the scene. So I became notified that several teams were already responding. Brunswick Police Department's special response team was responding. The York County Regional Team was responding, and Cumberland County's ESU, which is again just another version of a tactical team, was responding as well as Portland PD's special response team. So the first thing I did was call all these commanders for these particular teams, try to organize the tactical response, and really the first thing was changing the staging area. All those teams were responding to Lewiston Police Department, But from operating in Lewiston for years, I knew that wasn't going to work. It's on a one-way street. There's no parking. Tactical teams come with a lot of resources and very large vehicles. And I just knew that that was not going to be sufficient. So we moved that staging area to the Colisee parking lot, which we've used before in Lewiston for larger scale operations. So it was an area that we were familiar with. It's close enough to the police department that we can have access to that command post. So, and all those teams were great. They responded right to the staging area to be able to check in, with the exception of Cumberland County's team, who was tasked with security at the command post. So they responded direct to the command post to provide security. I also began notifying or communicating with other SWAT teams that were not responding, to advise them of the incident, place them on a standby, and also communicate, get that communication started should we need additional resources. And I think it's important to note, we had no idea where this suspect was. We didn't know where in the state he was. And so one thing I wanted to avoid was dumping all of our tactical resources into one location. And if they were to pop up geographically somewhere else, we would be unable to respond. So I made contact with the Bangor Police Department SWAT team, advised them the incident, and requested they stay in Bangor. Again, in case something happened in the northern part of the state, they would be able to respond and be there quicker. And I had the same conversation with Southern Maine's regional SWAT team, which is based out of the South Portland area, and requested they stay down south, so we would at least have some regional coverage. I've made contact with New Hampshire State Police SWAT team commander, again, advised them the incident, asked them not to respond yet, and had the same conversation with the FBI regional team out of Boston. Spoke to their commander over the phone and had that initial phone conversation. So this was all being done before I arrived on scene. As we're arriving in the Lewiston area, we have the Maine State Police Tactical Team has resources all throughout Maine, from York County to Aroostook County. So obviously our people are responding piecemeal from where they happen to be when this incident began. But as our resources are starting to arrive in Lewiston, we start getting these, which were later to be determined, false reports of additional shootings happening in Lewiston, one being at the Da Vinci's restaurant, and then the second one happening at the Walmart distribution center. My regional members of the team were just arriving in Lewiston around the time that Walmart distribution center incident began. So several of my people ended up responding to the distribution center, making entry, and then we're able to determine that, within partnerships of all the other first responders that responded, that was in fact not a confirmed sighting. I arrived in Lewiston. First thing I did was go right to the command post that was at Lewiston Police Department. My assistant commander was running the what we phrased as the tactical staging area at the Colisee parking lot, beginning to organize and determine what teams we had, what resources we had, and then come up with additional planning. When I arrived at the command post was around the time that the first images and confirmed identifications of Robert Card came out. I remember walking into the command post and there was an image of Robert Card being walked into the command post as I'm walking in. So it kind of all happened right when I arrived there. I started learning information about the individual, that he was a part of the Army Reserve. It was communicated that he was a trained marksman, firearms instructor, and believed to have access to several firearms, including rifles and specifically a thermal imaging scope. Which to me, hearing this was very concerning. That's a particular set of equipment that can be really challenging to overcome tactically in a tactical environment. So it was certainly something that was communicated out to our tactical operators. The first thing that we did, again, having no intel or information driving tactical operations at this point, was to divide Lewiston up geographically into 4 quadrants. So we essentially, with the assistance of a member of York County's regional team, who was a former member of Lewiston PD, divided the city of Lewiston up into 4 quadrants and assigned certain teams to those quadrants to be able to respond a little bit more efficiently to sightings with tactical resources, not necessarily at the first responder level, but tactical resources. So we weren't traveling, and passing each other and passing unnecessarily. The next, as more information about Robert Card began being established, we learned where he lived up in Bowdoin. And one of the first things that we did was dispatch a crew from my team, 4 members, in a vehicle to drive to that area to hopefully locate this vehicle that had been identified, the white Subaru. We located that vehicle, we'd be able to then direct tactical operations in that area. Around this same time, cell phone location data was indicating Robert Card's phone was locating in the area of his residence, which is again another thing that was directing us that way to try to locate this vehicle. So with that location information coming in, directing us to that boat in the area, the first real tactical operation that we planned was a search warrant of sorts at his residence. And, you know, the plan was to conduct a surround and call out search warrant at his residence and begin working that. So that was, we tasked that to the Maine State Police team in conjunction with Portland PD's SRT. And we began planning that, deciding who would do what as far as the perimeter assignments and different containment locations. Our team was ready to leave the tactical staging area, had just gotten in line, ready to leave when Robert Card's vehicle was located in Lisbon. We were notified of that around 10:05 p.m. And we were at the tactical staging area in Lewiston at that time. And this is where this incident to me became very familiar. And it's because I'm from Lisbon. I grew up in Lisbon. I grew up a half a mile from that boat landing. My parents still live there. And I was at this boat landing as a kid almost every weekend. So I'm intimately familiar with this area. So we responded with Portland Police Department's special response team directly to this boat landing to begin working that scene. We arrived around 10:23 p.m. And when we arrived, we were in a trail of basically armored vehicles to get there. And we couldn't even make it to the boat landing. Which is common at some of these larger scenes with a lot of police resources. The road was completely stacked with police cruisers. So the first thing that I did is I was in the lead vehicle. I got out and I began walking to the scene past the vehicles because again, we couldn't get there. So really the first thing we had to do was move some cars. So I walked up to the scene and I met up with a supervisor from Lewiston. Who is stationed in the area of the intersection of Route 196 and Frost Hill Avenue. And I began conversing with him and trying to determine what there was for resources here. There was a lot of people, a lot of vehicles, a lot of people, which, you know, would be to be expected when a key piece of information was located like there was in Lisbon. So I began working on that and then working on trying to widen the perimeter, back up the people that were there. So there was nobody directly involved in the vehicle, you know, certainly looked like the first responders did what they should have done and create a perimeter. There were a couple cruisers with officers behind them at the entrance to the parking lot. There are two driveways, for lack of a better term, that enter the parking area, and there were cruisers in both of those, kind of towards the parking stalls. And then specifically in the area that I was, there was a group of first responders kind of in that southwest corner of the lawn. I know you've heard this from other folks, but there is two walking trails from this parking area, one that goes to the north and one that goes to the south. So these first responders were kind of in that lawn area closest to the south trail. There's a couple trees there and they were using them for some cover. So I made my way on foot to them and then moved them back behind the guardrails. So that was kind of what I use as my line of delineation for that external perimeter was the guardrails at the intersection of 196 and Frost Hill Avenue. Then we began working with that Lewiston's, I believe it was a Lewiston sergeant who was super helpful with getting some of these vehicles moved. And then essentially said we were going to take over the parking lot and if the first responders could just generally patrol the area to assist with any other things that may come in. So once we were able to move those first responders out, our armored vehicles moved into some tactical positioning in the parking lot. We had two of our armored vehicles directly into the parking area. And again, our goal at this point was we didn't know if Robert Card was in the vehicle or not. And that was kind of our first objective, was to determine whether or not he was in there. So we're trying to use some spotlights, some different lighting to be able to see inside, but we couldn't because the windows were so dark and tinted, we couldn't see inside the car. We also had Portland Police Department's team on the bridge. There's a bridge that crosses, it's the Sabata Stream, there at that inlet to the Androscoggin River. And they use that bridge as kind of an overwatch position from their armored vehicle.
Excuse me, did you say the windows in the car are tinted?
They appeared to be. They were dark enough. I don't know in fact whether they were specifically tinted or not, but they were dark enough that we couldn't see inside. So the first thing that we had to do once we determined we couldn't see inside with the just use of light spotlights is we backed out. We're able to place a ram, which is just a big metal pole in the front of our armored vehicle. And then we use that to break the windows to be able to see inside, to get rid of that barrier. So that's what we did on the driver's side of the vehicle. And then quickly we're able to determine that there was nobody inside the vehicle. Specifically, we did see that there was a rifle on kind of between the floor and the front passenger seat. We could see it pretty clearly. And based on the images I had seen from the scenes, this appeared to be the rifle that was used, at least depicted in those photographs, based on the look of the rifle and then the optic that was on the rifle. So now that we knew Robert Card was not in the vehicle, obviously the new objective is where is he? So there were a couple porta potties at the boat landing, so we quickly were able to clear those and make sure, for whatever reason, he wasn't in there. And then we had a helicopter from New Hampshire State Police overhead scanning the area. And we've worked with this aircraft several times on joint operations. I know the capabilities of their equipment and know that it's very helpful at identifying heat signatures in wooded areas and open areas. So they were working there, then it got relayed to us that there was a potential heat signature along the trail to the north. So that became an item of interest for us. It was really the only thing that they were depicting as an item of interest. So we began moving on to that site using our armored vehicles. So there's a trail to the north. It is wide enough to drive on, but there's a security bollard that prevents vehicles from driving onto those trails. We just were able to get through that and then drive our Bearcat to the area where this heat signature was reported. Again, being very familiar with these trails and these walking trails, I know where they go, I know where they lead to, began going towards this heat signature, which ultimately determined to be unfounded, which is not unusual with heat signatures. Rocks and stumps and culverts all can produce different heat readings based on the ambient air temperature. So sometimes that happens and you just have to sort through that. The other thing that was happening at this moment is knowing, generally where this location was. I was trying to work to get other tactical resources in somewhat containment, but also response position should a sighting happen, because the best chances at locating somebody under these conditions is with a recent sighting. So the closer we can be and reduce that time response gap, the better off we're going to be in these situations. So I reported back to the tactical staging area and dispatched Brunswick Police Department's SRT team to the intersection of Route 9 and Route 196, which is essentially across from Lisbon High School. And so this would be in the area to the south of this boat landing, and dispatched York County's team to the Lisbon Community School, which is it's really the first major intersection of the trail to the north. So if you're traveling the trail to the north, you'd run into the Lisbon Community School. The trail continues past that, but at least that would be the first major intersection in that area. So we were kind of working this regional response. While this is happening, information's getting relayed. I'm learning of some concerning things regarding locations of first responders being reported being on the trails or in the woods, which is concerning to me with my folks being out there and being able to deconflict that. If we were to see someone in the woods, obviously that's concerning to us. We need to know if there's gonna be first responders out there so we don't have confrontations that don't need to happen. So that became began becoming aware of that. And then also other information, other intel was coming in, being communicated to me. I was constantly on the phone with the chief of Lisbon, Chief McGee, and he was helping to communicate some of these more intel-based incidents that were popping up while we were working the boat landing. And the first being an incident at Springwork Farms, which is a very large building, about 0.8 miles northwest of this boat landing area. It was reported to me that an employee had been present. I heard what they depicted as somebody inside, deep inside the building, running or moving around, and then hearing a door slam. And then that employee seeing that there was an interior bathroom door that was now locked from the inside. It seemed pretty concerning based on the circumstances. It seemed very unusual. Around the same time this is happening, the cell phone is still locating in the Bowdoin area that was attributed to Robert Card. And there was information coming in that a potential person that would be threatened by Robert Card was an I think my memory recalls ex-girlfriend, or may have been an ex-wife of his, and initial information was coming in that person lived in Lisbon. So given the proximity of the vehicle in Lisbon and this person being in Lisbon, that was a major concern of mine. If there was going to be an incident, whether it be another shooting or a hostage situation that we'd be having to respond to given this new intel. So that was still being sorted out. I was in communication with our major crimes unit. They were trying to get an address. We didn't have anything actionable on that at the moment. So all this is kind of happening at once, and trying to determine the next steps. And so really this is, and I'll address it because the question's already been asked. And this is when the whole canine track was considered, and it was considered. So and ultimately it was decided not to do the canine track or to attempt a canine track. And that was for several reasons. And, I think the first would be looking at the time delay in that moment. I'm familiar with, again, I grew up in Lisbon. I'm familiar with Lewiston. I've been to Schmegges before. I know the travel time from that area to the boat landing, approximate. Based on that calculation, the time delay of that attempted track by the time we were ready to do that which was around 11 p.m., would have been over 3 hours. In the canine track world is a very long delay track. And one of the biggest factors with influencing the ability to track successfully is time. And as time goes on, that scent dissipates. So knowing that 3 hours delay would be in and amongst itself a challenge. And then we had, environmental factors. Tracking on pavement is more difficult than tracking in the woods. Scent doesn't retain for as long. We've already talked about, aerial assets, helicopters, that rotor wash can dissipate scent. But also one of the major impacts for scent for canines to work through is running vehicles, the exhaust fumes. And there was dozens of police vehicles on scene running, and this exhaust fume would have been challenging for a canine track. And also, I generally speak of scene contamination, and I don't want that to be confused with criticism, because it's not. And I think the nature of a perimeter is there's going to be scene contamination because you're trying to contain this individual, and that's what I would argue that that was a big factor in this situation. So, and then factoring in that the information was that there were people on the trails in the woods that we weren't accounted for, that we couldn't account for, and that would be really dangerous for both us and them should we attempt a search in that moment. And the fact of, this helicopter was overhead and not showing any heat signatures of interest worth pursuing. And if there was, we would have maneuvered on those and tried to identify them, but there wasn't. And then taking the likelihood of this attempted track and its ability to be successful, and then comparing that to the intel-based missions that had come up since we had been there, and then prioritizing them. A high-risk canine track, which is what this would be, is extremely challenging and extremely dangerous. There was some talk of, patrol canine assets conducting this operation. And under these against this individual, under these circumstances, I would not even consider that an option. I think the goal of a canine track is to find the individual, right? But you also have to be able to win the encounter. And given the weaponry, given the technology that we at least at this time believe the individual possessed, that would be an unwinnable situation for a canine team to be tracking at night under white light. It just would not be winnable. With a 3-hour delay, you're not going to catch an individual, you're going to find them. And when we find them, we have to be able to win that encounter. So that's why a canine track of this magnitude would be a SWAT or a canine tactical team level track. And we do have attached canine handlers to our team. We have those assets, we had them with us in the parking lot. And had we decided to conduct a canine track under these circumstances against this individual with the information we knew at the time, it would have taken all of the SWAT resources that we had in that moment, including, my whole team and all the other tactical operators that were attached to this incident at the time. And so I'm making this decision based on this knowledge. Am I prepared to attach 100% of our SWAT resources and not have the ability to be able to respond to a fresh sighting, which is a much higher chance of locating this individual, not be able to address Springwork Farms, not be prepared to respond to the ex's residence when we get that location, because they would all be dedicated to this canine track. And there's reasons for that. And a canine is just one tool in our toolbox as a tactical team. And we've gotten in trouble in past incidents with trying to force this tool in inappropriate situations, knowing that it's likely not going to work. And I can give an example of that on another manhunt that I was part of, and on that tracking team, where it was a very long delay. We had no other intel, no other missions that were tasked up to us at this point. So we tried a canine track, and that canine track was over 8 miles under some pretty intense terrain. And it eventually led us to a bog of sorts, where it was basically mud as far as you could see in every direction. And we tracked right through that mud, and there wasn't a single human footprint in that mud, indicating that obviously the individual we were tracking was not going that way. And so what is the harm in that? The harm is that we wasted a full day of operations to do that canine track. And trying to force the inappropriate tool in the situation can lead to consequences. And that was a consequence of that. And it wasn't a huge deal in that operation because, again, we had no other, it was quite a ways into this incident, and we had no other missions at that point. Now, applying that logic to this situation, there was a lot to do still. And at this time, knowing based on my experience with these contaminated, long delay tracks, the likelihood of this being successful was very, very low. And the likeliness of this leading us to a waste of resources was much higher. So made the decision at this time to leave Portland Police Department's team there to secure the vehicle site. There was some concerns about explosives in the vehicle, so we had to have our bomb team clear that vehicle before it could be processed for evidence. So they were going to remain there to secure that, and my team left for Springwork Farms. And I can take a break at this moment, and if there's any questions about the canine aspect where I just talked about that, I don't know if we want to address that.
So if you had chosen to do a canine track, what exactly does that involve? You bring the dog to the car, bringing it into the car to try to pick up a specific human scent and then see if the dog can follow that scent?
That is the goal. Yeah, the goal is to try to get the dog onto a specific human odor, but obviously the dog can't, look at you and be like, yeah, we're on this suspect. It's gonna track a human odor that it finds. That's the goal.
Is there anything legally that stops you from inserting the dog into the car? I mean, this is a car, so you don't need a search warrant.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think we would be able to articulate a variety of different exceptions to a warrant requirement to be able to insert the dog into the car, 100%.
Could have done that.
Could have, yes.
And then the reason that why you would need every SWAT team asset to do this high risk tracking is what? Because you have to have so much extra security because of the darkness, the risk of
Yeah.
being ambushed.
Yeah, and so I'll touch on a couple different things. So yes, we could insert the dog in the car, but at this time it was not clear of explosives and there was some bags with some wires sticking out of it, and knowing the active shooter world and a lot of times, explosives are kind of interlinked there. It would have been some delay before we could do that, but we could have cast around the vehicle, or at least in the driver's side. The actual tactics of how we conduct high-risk canine tracks are a little bit sensitive information, but generally, yes, that track is going to contain a vast amount of resources because not only do we have to find the person, but we have to be able to take them into custody, and that's going to look differently depending on how that person's acting. And we have to be able to maneuver through some different threats that we may be encountering. If someone has a thermal imaging scope and we are tracking them at night, the likeliness of that first contact being initiated through an ambush is extremely high. And we would have probably taken some form of casualties, injuries from that initial interaction. So we have to have plans and contingency plans for that, of how are we going to evacuate those wounded people. And so that's going to be where some of the teams are going to be dedicated to that. You're an officer rescue team and you're in a piece of armor that are going to be dedicated to respond to that. But we also need the ability to stop that person. And, we can find them, but if they keep running away, for lack of a better term, you have to get on the other end of it. And that takes resources to be able to block some of those paths.
You learned in the course of the evening that the murder weapon was a 308.
Yes, yeah, I knew, we knew that early on before we conducted any operations that, based on a casing that was
Your body
found.
armor give you protection against that?
Yeah, so I sort of, and I don't really want to get.
Great answer.
Yeah, well, I don't really want to get into the specifics of what our protection will and will not stop just for operational security types of publicly. That's information we don't release, but yeah, we have higher level of ballistic protection than a standard police officer would have on the road.
That was the answer to the question I should have asked.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
You and your colleagues mentioned a few times, you folks set up a perimeter around the boat launch. Can you articulate more what size is that perimeter? Because, you got the river and stream blocking it. So I wasn't sure when you say perimeter, does it mean access point or actually you set a perimeter all around different parts, including the trailheads? Because you have two trails, top and bottom, north and south. So I don't know, was that part of your perimeter or really just a boat launch?
Are you talking about, well, as a TAC team, what we established?
No, I hear you were working with others, say, hey, set a perimeter so I can do my thing here, but what were they covering? And that leads to my second question is, obviously, you don't know where he went. He could have gotten in a car, he could have gotten on a boat, he could walk up the two trails. Were there discussion about, okay, let's at least look at the two trails, and did he go out that way? So I guess two questions.
Yeah, he'll answer the second question because that was like going on the missions.
Yeah.
But you can go into the perimeter.
Yeah, so there was a certain perimeter when we arrived there that the first responders took care of setting. And so that was a couple vehicles, 3, 4 vehicles kind of in those inlet areas to the parking lot, and then individuals on the lawn area in that parking area. However, there was also unaccounted for individuals that were communicated to be on the trails and in the woods. I don't think a lot of people knew they were there. And I can go into more detail about that if you'd like, but.
But are those are law enforcement people that?
Yeah, first responding control officers, yeah. And so when we got there, we assumed complete control over the perimeter. So we relieved all the first responders and we did not deploy anybody on foot with the exception of Portland Police Department who was on the bridge. And so they were on foot. Our perimeter was contained in armored vehicles. And so we had two of them, one of them set up on the driver's side, kind of looking straight at the driver's side, and then one looking at the rear of the vehicle.
Go ahead.
You've indicated that you had a number of TAC team resources available to, how many bodies, TAC team bodies did you have?
Between all the teams that were there in this moment,
Yes,
I
not
don't know.
those you've left in place.
Sure. At the boat landing itself, I mean, this is just an estimation, because again, we're still in the early stages of this incident, so full accountability really hadn't happened yet of SWAT resources. I'd say approximately 30 at the boat landing.
30.
Yeah.
And they come, you indicated, with resources. What resources did they have?
So they come essentially, so all teams work differently. So we're a statewide element. All of my individual operators have all their equipment with them in their vehicle.
Which
So
includes what? For those of us that aren't familiar with.
that is something. So I think
That's not something that we really want to discuss and make public.
I'd be more than willing to speak to the panel on that privately. I mean, it's just there's certain technology that exists that we don't.
But they have resources.
Yes.
And do those resources include thermal imaging scopes?
No. So we don't use thermal imaging targeting systems because we can't engage something just because it's hot. So we have to have facial identification. So we have to use different technology.
So, and I appreciate the concerns that you've expressed, so it's the appropriate response, I'm sure you'll give it to me. But I'm assuming you have resources that can counter thermal imaging scopes.
In time. And
You will have them in time?
no, it would take time to counter that. To counter a distance threat targeted at us under a thermal optic would take time. It would not be an instantaneous elimination of that threat based on the challenges presented to that and real world operating. We would eventually counter that threat. We would eventually win that encounter, but it would take time.
So do you have an estimate of how much time?
It all depends on the situation and the terrain, the distance, all of it.
And are you, you have canine certification? Do you have special certifications or training with respect to the use of canines? So are you canine specialists or whatever the appropriate?
We have canine handlers that are dedicated to our team. So they are fully trained SWAT operators that are on our team that are issued canines that we use in a variety of different capacities on SWAT operations.
And their canines are certified through Maine Criminal Justice Academy.
Right. And are you, either of you, a canine handler?
I was never a canine handler. I'm obviously have the operational knowledge of working with them in a very close capacity for several years. Not to speak for Lieutenant Stevenson, but he's a handler.
I was.
Yeah.
Back when I was younger and
Do you
fitter.
need some certification to be a canine handler? Is that just a function of specialized training?
So the handler and the canine are a unit, canine unit, and they are certified together. They need so many hours of training depending on what their specialty is, have to pass a certification test and continuing education after they're initially certified through the MCJA, continuing training and hours and recertifications yearly.
And when the decision was made not to pursue the canine tracking, that was done after conferring with the canine handlers?
Yeah, so in this armored vehicle that I was in, the canine handler sitting right across from me. So, we had a conversation about the challenges present. based on the situation that him and I were both seeing real time. Based on the challenges presented, that calculates into my decision-making as far as, you know, risk versus reward on doing this operation.
I would like to add, if it's all right.
Sure.
The commission, this has been a conversation with us since this has happened. And always looking to see what can we do better as a unit? What can we do better as an agency? And our tactical canines are that they're tactical, so they are tracking, they conduct building searches, they obviously bite people, bite suspects, sometimes bite us. And they're like a multi-tool. This tracking situation that we faced here, we need something specific for that. And we've identified that. And we're in the process of obtaining, it's coming real soon, a single purpose tracking bloodhound. That's all it does. That it specializes in long delay tracks. So that's something that we recognize as a problem with this particular call, outside of the resource demand it would take at the time, but giving us that extra tool in our toolbox to try and work through these problems.
So were you aware of this specially trained dog at the time on October 25th of the existence of this kind of canine tracker?
Yeah.
And was there any effort made to reach out to a department that might have one of those specially trained dogs?
So there are none in Maine. And so we're talking about an out-of-state resource at this point, which would, again, you're talking several hours to get it there. And so at this point, it was not tenable.
So, where was the location of the most readily available dog that had these special skills?
I don't have the answer to that question. I think it's important to also note again that the vast majority of single purpose tracking dogs out there are search and rescue dogs. You know, their primary mission is, you know, dementia patients, missing children. These are not tactical team handlers. And as we kind of mentioned before, that person conducting a track under white light without night vision equipment or the technology to conduct that is not, again, not a situation that we can win. And to your question regarding technology, you can't pair up an operator who's operating under night vision and then have a non-tactical operator operating a canine under white light, because the two technologies they don't function together. Essentially, night vision amplifies light. So if someone's using white light, you can't see anything under night vision. So the two technologies can't work together. And then to train somebody that has not worked under night vision before is hours in days probably to be proficient in the use of it. So it's not as simple as just getting even that resource there. Even if we had it available, because to apply that to track this individual would be not safe and not really an option.
Any other questions? Yeah.
So I want to go back to the point where you arrived at the parking lot. You said that the parking lot was full. There are a couple dozen cars. Is that right?
The parking lot itself was not full of a couple dozen cars. Those dozen cars were on Route 196 and Frost Hill Avenue, and that's why we couldn't get to the scene. So I had to walk there and get those cars moved. There were only 3 or 4 cars in the entrance to the boat landing where the parking lot would be, and they were kind of in those 2 inlets.
And what were they doing?
They were watching the vehicle, covering on the vehicle, and essentially that was part of their containment.
And you mentioned that you were concerned about people in the woods.
Yes, sir.
Would the New Hampshire helicopter and its equipment picked up those people?
So what happened with that specific incident is, I told you earlier about my crew of 4 individuals that went to Bowdoin. So they were redirected to the Lisbon boat landing. And when they got there, they linked up with a crew of first responders that was on Frost Hill Avenue, kind of to the east of the boat landing. So they were kind of paired up with those individuals. So I got radio traffic directed at me, asking me if I had people on the walking trails. I replied, no, we don't. And then my team leader of that team was sorting out that information. And what happened there was those first responders that was with my team at this location were asking them, hey, are your guys in the woods? Because we have other first responders that are seeing people on the trail. And so we're trying to deconflict that information. So after my team leader in that vehicle was like, no, we don't have any tactical operators outside of our vehicles at this point. They looked into that and they were like, oh, that was one of us. We're working on getting that person out of there. So that's where it became clear to me that we don't have accountability of our people. We have at least one person that was seen by the first responders on one of the trails, walking on the trails. And that's when I became concerned that there are these people out there. There was another first responder sitting in the woods just off the road that we didn't know was there until we went to leave. So we went to leave and they kind of startled my folks that were in that car. So this was all happening in this moment.
So in terms of, I don't know anything about dog tracking. How close does the handler have to remain to the dog?
That's a great question. And so the way we train to track is on lead. So there are some dogs again, I'm not an expert in our warden service, but our warden service search and rescue dogs often track off lead. So they'll let them go. And because the dog isn't going to bite anyone, I think they're all black labs and we'll find the lost kid and everything's great. But we can't track that way. So we track on lead. So because we have to be able to use the dog and how the dog's acting to help aid us into where we think this individual would be. So oftentimes it's a 6-foot lead or whatever we're tracking on, sometimes longer depending on the situation.
We hear a lot about what you folks are doing with the tactical response piece, and this may be directed to you, Colonel, is this became a statewide concern because there was a focus on the boat launch in some of the immediate area, but a lot of communities, the whole state was thinking this guy was all running through the backyard. And, schools were locked down as far as Bangor and God knows where, where else. So how were you thinking at this point? Again, nothing is 100%, but were you thinking most of the search concentration is in that area? Because again, the whole state was basically a search area because everyone's thinking that way.
I think that's the search area because that's where the car is, at least in this time frame that we're talking about. Certainly the entire state needs to be aware of this, and that's disseminating information out. I think this is what we did successfully. And that's to prepare communities. Is this guy southbound coming into Hartford, Connecticut? It goes beyond that. It goes beyond to our, not only New England states, but the 4 corners of Maine. Every law enforcement agency, every community needs to be aware that this person is out there. And I can't stress this enough. You don't know where he is, right? We don't know where he is, but right now we're working on things that until something brings us somewhere else. So those actionable type pieces of information, that's what we're working with. And that's what the tactical team's working with. So that's the same reason the dive and underwater recovery assets were brought in because the river's right there. There were a lot of people that day and 2 or 3 days afterwards, oh, he's in the river, he's in the river. So getting that information out is what's critical. And I think that's just the due diligence on the law enforcement community as a whole to make sure that they have people. And I think you heard earlier from Major Hare about how the sheer volume of calls for service that came in. Every call that came in was a call plus Robert Card. Every loud noise, every car accident, everything involved Robert Card has not been found and we're going to this call.
And I'm assuming this is through the PIO with that IC structure. PIO was involved with, or is it mostly PIO related to the state trooper stuff?
Yeah, that could go out through our public information offer, social media, and then that just blows out from there, particularly when it hits social media. And I mean, at this time we had national media involved. people across the country knew that this was happening.
And I think the last thing I'll say, well, not the last of those, obviously more questions, we can talk about this for as long as you want, but on the canine situation is, this experience is coming from years of doing this. And this is, the high-risk canine track is a frequent part of our mission. And I personally have been on over 60 high-risk canine tracks in my career. Several months before this, we were involved in a deadly force encounter that was public on a canine track. So this is the function of what we do, and we take those lessons learned and that knowledge from that experience to apply it to future situations.
Question.
Yeah, just a couple. Is it correct, is my understanding correct that there were among first responders are sort of before you guys got there were a patrol canine? So I guess my question is, what their level of expertise around dealing with a canine? It seems like they would understand why deploying their canine on a night search with a guy perhaps with some thermal imaging might be a good idea. So I guess my question is, they presumably understood why you were deploying them. They might have had questions about why you were deploying your canine unit, but is that correct?
I would like to think so, yes.
Was there any pushback? Why, I'm here, I got my canine, I'm ready to go, or did they go, yeah, maybe this is not a good idea?
From on scene, there was no pushback at all about us taking over that scene, about us working that scene. All the first responders were great, talked to them, relieved them to patrol. There was no conflict there at all.
And my other question, maybe you'll get to this, and so I might hold it because I know you have more to go here, but given the amount, okay, the car is located, the amount of law enforcement, per square mile in that vicinity, is there some speculation that might have contained him there? He doesn't have his car, granted, there might have been some other vehicle potentially involved or whatever, but he doesn't have that vehicle. And there's like so much law enforcement around there. Was there an idea, did that sort of help think, okay, he's not getting out. If he's here now, he's not getting out from here. Let's look more deeply here.
I don't think we have any idea if that played a factor or not.
In your thinking, it didn't play a factor, certainly.
I have no idea.
And again, we don't know where he is. You don't know if he had another car.
Right.
You don't know if he had a watercraft. You don't know if and at this point in time, and I think the criminal investigation will touch on this, there's information that there might be other people involved in this.
Okay.
And once that comes into play, this thing really starts to go in a lot of different directions, and there's things that we have to track down, which I think plays into some of the decisions you see, particularly this point moving forward.
And you're going to talk about where else. I know, I've kind of looked through your slide, went ahead in the program a little bit and looked at your slides. So you're going to talk about where your teams also went.
Yes,
Okay, because I have some questions left.
sure.
Well, we concluded, then go on with the rest of your presentation. Oh, excuse me.
Would you be able to identify for the commission, either the names of or the agencies of those other first responders who were identified on the trail or found on that trail?
I have looked into that since, and we don't know. And part of that is because those individuals from my team that were paired up with those first responders are not from this area. They're from away, so they don't know them. They couldn't even tell me what agency they were with, because again, there were so many different law enforcement agencies at the scene there, which was, part of that accountability problem. So I don't know that we will be able to. We can try. We certainly can try and look into that further, but I don't want that to go since I can't keep.
Thank you.
Okay, you can make continue.
So from the boat landing, Portland Police Department stayed there, and we went to Springwood Farms to investigate that incident that was reported. So we made entry into this facility after establishing some containment on it. Kind of shocked with what was actually inside there. It's kind of a warehouse, but there was, I think they grow lettuce, but there was like fish and ponds. And so there's a lot going on in there. It was a complicated area to clear. So very big warehouse building. But we had the advantage, Lisbon PD had gotten us a floor plan of the building and had the employer, at least an employee representative, mark on that map where this bathroom was. So we had a little bit of a head start there because of their work. So we made entry in the facility, started clearing the open space, found this bathroom, which is in fact closed. Came up with a quick plan with the resources we had there to breach this door and then soften it. And by soften it, I mean is to do some searching into that without us physically having to be there with use of technology and canines. So we breached the bathroom door, sent one of our dogs in there for a search with no indications. We entered and cleared the bathroom, and there was nobody in there. So don't really know how that all happened, but we're able to search the rest of that building, at least close that intel out as unfounded. By this time, our major crimes unit had gotten a possible address for this X in Lisbon. So we proceeded to that area. And we had resources deploy on perimeter of that residence, set containment, and then we tried to make contact with the occupants. And that's just like over the PA or armored vehicle, trying to raise them, get them to come outside and talk to us. That wasn't successful, couldn't get in touch with anybody. Our crisis negotiators, which are embedded with us on these operations, they do a lot of our intel work while we're in the field. So they were able to dig into the occupants of this residence, end up getting somebody on the phone, make contact with them, and we're able to determine that it wasn't really connected how we thought we were connected, provided that information to the criminal investigators, but at least determined that this residence was safe and that there was nobody in need. Our Lisbon Police Department then came up to us as we cleared, and they provided us with some information that there was a residence not far from where we were that was owned by the Card family and then rented out to tenants. There happened to be a local police officer that was the neighbor to these people, knew who they were, but couldn't get in touch with them, which was unusual. So that was a concern of ours, again, given the proximity of the vehicle in Lisbon and then this Card family residence in Lisbon, that maybe there was some connection there. So we just did the same exact thing we just did at this house, did it over there. But this time we were able to successfully call the people out of the house, the tenants of that residence, and determine again, unfounded, and they were safe. So kind of check that off the intel checklist. So now we kind of had exhausted, and now, this is all, I talked about this in a matter of minutes, but obviously these operations take time. We're now around 1:30 in the morning, and no sightings, no further intel was developed in this moment. So again, another lesson learned from past operations is not overextending our operational periods. And that's a mistake that we've done in the past, where we tend to not want to leave, not want to stop working, and we work to 30+ hours, and then, well, now who's coming to work the next day? So at this point, started working into that operational period assessment and determining who was going to go into a rest cycle at this point and who is going to stay operational. And so that operational team would then be responsible for any intel-driven action that would be happening that evening. And the people in the rest cycle obviously would be for rest. So we started making those assignments. We used Lisbon High School as our staging area, again, because we're in Lisbon. Our goal was, our hope was, that we would have a sighting of intel-based action that we were able to launch on quickly, start a canine track, start a search with that fresh, untainted area. So that was our goal. It obviously never happened. But we had a team both in a rest cycle in Lisbon High School, sleeping on gym mats, and we had a team in a ready status, being able to respond to any intel-based sightings. By this time, we had other SWAT teams that I had called in. Those Bangor team and that Southern Maine team that we spoke about earlier that I kept regionally, we brought those into Lewiston to help work this overnight operational period. And we had our first federal team show up, which was Homeland Security Investigations. Their SWAT team showed up. So we used them in a operational status for our overnight period as well. And really now, I leave my team in Lisbon and I go back to the command post. The reason I went to Lisbon in the first place was in my familiarity with that scene and being able to assist with that operation. But since that was over, I went back to the command post, and that's really where I stayed the whole time from this point forward, with the exception of my rest cycles. So Now I'm going into this tactical planning process where I'm really trying to gain accountability for what SWAT resources we have on scene, what tasks may need to be conducted, and then planning for future operational periods. And that's kind of what happened in this overnight period. So I tasked for our daytime operational period, and our operational periods we used on the tactical side was 8 to 8. So we used 12-hour cycles, 8 in the morning to 8 p.m. with some overlapping periods there for briefing time. So we weren't without operations, but we used those operational periods for us. But for our daytime operational period was going to be assigned with New Hampshire State Police, their SWAT team, an element from our team. We called up FBI regional team out of Boston. They were going to be there for the day shift. The ATF or AATF SWAT team had arrived, and then Portland PD was going to be back for the day shift. So that was kind of our daytime operational period. And then the teams I mentioned earlier, we had on our evening coverage. We were tasked with our first overnight operation at 3:33 in the morning. And that was to clear a business in Auburn. It was communicated to us that was associated with someone related to Robert Card, friend, associate, whatever that would be. And there was a concern that Robert Card may be going there to harm this person. They were working a night shift, whatever that may be. So I dispatched HSI's SWAT team and Bangor PD's SWAT team to clear that facility. And so one of the teams cleared the inside, one of the teams cleared the outside, shipping containers, outbuildings, things of that nature. Determined to be clear, there was nobody in there. That operation took just over an hour. Around 3:50 in the morning, we started getting tasked with establishing some security details on some residences in the Bowdoin area. One being Card's residence itself to secure it for a search warrant that would take place during the daytime operational period. That was assigned to the Southern Maine SWAT team to carry that out. And then there was a residence in the Bowdoin area that was communicated to me that was housing family members of Card. And that's where they were staying. So we set a security detail on that. Again, not knowing where he was, we can at least secure that space. So that was actually assigned to Immigration and Customs Enforcement's team. And they actually maintained that detail independently throughout the whole operation, taking care of their own swap outs. And they kept that detail in place for the whole operation. So now that was kind of our overnight operational period. And that time from, I got back to the command post around 2 o'clock in the morning, shortly thereafter, to now 8 o'clock when we're briefing our daytime assets for the missions that they're going to conduct that day. One of the missions was a search warrant to be conducted on Card's residence. Again, not knowing where Card was, that was obviously something we needed to secure for investigators to be able to do their evidence search. That was tasked to Maine's team and New Hampshire's team. We had, our last known that we had at this point. Again, like I said, during those overnight hours, we were hoping some actionable intel would come in. Didn't really happen. So we were going to go back to our known, being that vehicle in the parking lot of the boat landing, and then do a line search north of the boat landing using the FBI team with a conjunction of my team, including a canine. So again, if we had, a sighting or push some sighting information there, we'd be able to deploy immediately and start that track. And then we had an area of interest in Monmouth that was believed to be frequented by Card that we were going to fly with some air assets, and then had a SWAT team be able to react if they were to pop up a sighting there. So that's kind of our daytime operational periods. They were pretty resource intensive. Most of them were completed by noon or shortly thereafter. And there was no, obviously, apprehension of Card or sighting.
Walking trail adjacent to Wood Search, how far did you go on that?
All the way to Lisbon Community School. So
that would be to past the recycling center?
It's recycling centers to the south.
As a south, like,
Yeah. So that we did that in the afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah.
If
yeah.
I could, while we're on the South Trail.
Sure.
Did I understand you to say the canines were used that afternoon on the South Trail?
No, and we had canines with those teams again. So if while they're traveling, there's a sighting, as in like, oh, there he is, we would be able to deploy immediately and start tracking that, which in tracking in that situation is much higher chance of being successful.
And well, since we're on the subject.
Sure.
Prior to the afternoon of October 26th, had you received any information that Robert Card may be at Maine Recycling?
I wouldn't characterize it as he may be at Maine Recycling. I know that when I got back to the command post and we were planning daytime operation for that operational period during the day, Maine Recycling was on a list of locations that Robert Card associated with, but I wouldn't characterize it as there was direct information that he was there. Obviously, we researched that much sooner.
And so the folks that were providing security to the Card family, were they receiving any information from the Card family? They knew him, obviously, the best probably of anybody. They're his family. Were they providing any information about where he may be?
So this team was not in contact with the Card family. They were basically sitting in the woods around Card's family, securing the property so that if Card tried to come on the property, they would be the team to intercept that from happening and protect them. But they weren't like with the family.
Did you have any awareness that anyone who was in contact with the Card family were they providing information about, kind of the psychology of their brother, where he might go, what he might be doing? Or should I leave that?
The investigative.
I'll leave that for the next. Yeah, we're gonna get there.
So just a quick question. On the morning of the 26th, you said that the recycling facility was on the list of possible places or connections to
Yes.
Mr. Card. Was a distinction made between the main recycling facility and the overflow lot? Were you informed of that?
I did not hear about the overflow lot until the 27th. So the main recycling itself was what was confirmed to me.
Did you talk to Chief McGee about the main overflow lot at 2 AM on the 26th?
No.
So he didn't tell you, you didn't tell him to take all his units and clear out the area?
No.
Were you aware that they had done a cursory search of that overflow lot?
I did not find that out until after the 27th. I didn't know they were down there until after the 27th.
Good question. I know you have all these different teams from every direction coming help you. Do you think the fact that because they don't know the area, they can only search what they know in front of them? So like you're from the area, you know all the nooks and crannies and all kinds of stuff. So would have been helpful to attach a local liaison with some of these teams so that, hey, there's this spot over here, there's this spot here, because they would never know the spot.
So you stole my thunder, because that was that's one of the AAR points that we came up with afterwards is attaching a local asset to each one of these teams and also regionalizing SWAT response. So so there were teams that would be dedicated to Lisbon, teams that would be dedicated to Bowdoin, but attaching it at the patrol level, like a patrol asset to those SWAT teams, because they could help in a variety of different capacities. But that was one of our AAR parts from this. No, I appreciate it again.
Because it turned out that the main recycling search was by Brunswick SWAT and Portland SWAT.
Yeah, correct.
Nobody local.
Right. And in fairness, there is no local, I mean, Brunswick is probably the most local SWAT team to Lisbon. And although I am from Lisbon, I didn't know there was an overflow lot down there either. So that would really be a local police asset that would be responsible for helping with
So
that.
I have a geography question again. So from the boat launch, the North Trail, it looks like from the photos here, you have to cross 196 to continue north on the trail.
That's the South Trail. So the North Trail goes along the Sabatis. And so that goes to Lisbon Community School. And the South Trail goes actually underneath 196 and then parallels the railroad tracks south on the Androscoggin River.
Right next to the river.
Very
close.
Yeah, you can see the river. There's, scenic outlooks where you can go and sit, and have lunch on the river and stuff.
Right, thank you.
You may continue, I gather.
So now we're into the afternoon of the 26th, and we've already talked about some of that operation, but I'll kind of just go through everything that was done there. We had this confirmed sighting in Rumford, and I think it was one of the members of command staff mentioned this. We had a sighting in Rumford, said this is him. We have a photograph of somebody. This is definitely him. There was a family member of Card that said, yes, that's Robert Card. And so obviously this is like the first sighting, for lack of a better term, that we had. So we started launching some SWAT assets by both air and ground to Rumford. And then quickly thereafter, Rumford PD was able to close that loop, and I think it was some utility delivery person that happened to resemble
It was what? I'm sorry.
some utility delivery person. I want to say gas or oil, but I don't know. Someone not Robert Card. So we were.
Asked this before, and this may be more for the investigative side, but the photograph of Robert Card that was publicized on the night of the 25th. I don't think it really looked a lot like what he looked like on that date. It seemed to be an old picture or out-of-date picture, maybe a much heavier than Robert Card.
I have no knowledge. I have no knowledge on that. I would have to be
Yeah.
from the investigative side. The only photograph I saw of him was from still from the surveillance
Yeah.
video from those sites.
I believe the photo you're referring to is a DMV photo.
Pardon me?
The photo with the blue background, that's a DMV photo.
It could have been years old.
Correct. So after we recalled ourselves from that sighting, Maine Recycling, we just talked about it, was one of the locations on the list. Portland PD and Brunswick PD's team was dispatched down there. Similar to how the teams handled the Auburn incident, one cleared the inside, one cleared the trailers and the outside of the property. And determined that there was nobody in there.
Not including the over.
Not including the overflow lot, because if you look at the overflow lot, it's not even adjacent to the property of Maine Recycling. So at the time that we were working here, they were just dispatched there to clear the actual physical Maine Recycling property.
When you search these places, do you ask the owner, hey, tell me what this looks like? Because would the owner have said, hey, I mean, again, I'm just Monday morning for, ask the owner, I'll search your property. What's your property looking like? Was that discussion, did that occur? Because he would have identified, hey, I have a lot over here too.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what was done. I don't know I don't think the owners were on scene there. I think there was Lisbon PD folks down there that escorted the SWAT teams in.
Okay, so the owner doesn't even know this was being searched potentially.
I think they were aware. They were told and because they wanted it to happen, which is part of the reason we were doing it.
You may proceed.
So they cleared from that area. There was another family property in Bowdoin that we were tasked to search. The FBI team conducted that, cleared that property. There's another family property on the Meadow Road that we were tasked with searching. My team and New Hampshire's team conducted that. And then we did the boat landing trail to the south, just past what we now know as that overflow lot at Maine Recycling. So that search was conducted with a mix of like UTVs and on foot in that area. Just there's that trail to the south, very challenging terrain. There's like a huge retaining wall on your left that makes it really difficult to walk, and you really just have this small area between the trail and the river that you're able to travel and traverse.
And consent search means the Card family consented to the search.
Yes, and oftentimes they wanted it to be conducted.
Right.
Yeah, to make sure
Yeah.
it was safe.
Sure.
So now that kind of wrapped up our daytime operational period, and we're now into our overnight period. We brought in the Massachusetts State Police STOP team, which is again, just another word for a tactical team. We had the FBI regional team available to us, as well as an element of our ICE and HSI SWAT partners. Our first overnight tasking was at 2:00 in the morning. There was some investigative information that suggested there was a potential accomplice to the shootings themselves in Lewiston. That individual was associated with a property in Lisbon in a gravel pit, a residence in a gravel pit or around a gravel pit. And we were tasked with inserting kind of covert surveillance into that area to basically look at the property, see if there's any movement, any individuals coming and going from it, and basically gather some intel. So we did that in darkness. And the decision was made as we were kind of wrapping that up to clear from that area or leave that area before daylight, because there hadn't been any actionable intel that came from that. I'm sure there'll be questions on the accomplice thing. I'll leave that to the major crimes investigative side to discuss that side of it, but it was basically found that was unfounded and we moved on. At 2:15, there was a call into the Veteran Suicide Hotline. An individual claiming to be Robert Card called in, said that he admitted to what had happened and claimed to be scared of the police. Our investigative partners started looking at cellular location data based on that phone number, tracked that to an apartment building in Lewiston, a pretty large apartment building in Lewiston. So at this point, I started briefing up the FBI team, which was located at the command post. They were going to be tasked with this operation. Could we get an actual apartment information or track that down with some additional technology? But again, our investigators did a really good job. We're able to sort through that as a hoax and determine that not to be actually Robert Card and not related to this investigation. But all this takes resources, even though it's eventually determined to be unfounded, it was resource intensive. So now we're into the morning of the 27th, and this is where, you know, our intel-based operations really had dried up, for lack of a better term. And we really didn't have much intel-based to go on. So this is where, which is pretty traditional in manhunt situations, we switch from intel-driven action to this proactive systematic search of the area, where we're trying to physically chunk off areas to search them methodically, which is much more resource intensive because you're talking line searches of dozens of officers to be able to physically say, we checked this area of land, no evidence, no person. And that would be the goal of those systematic searches. And so that's a lot of what was being conducted. So we went to several residences in the Monmouth Bowdoin area that were known to be associated or believed to be associated with Card. And we conducted searches of them. And then also now we're including we call curtilage searches, or searches of the area, the wooded area immediately around these properties, looking for evidence and signs of people. So again, this is much more resource intensive, but we had a lot of resources to do this. So we started chunking off some of this. The other thing that was being done, not solely from a SWAT perspective, but we were now conducting methodical searches of the area around the boat landing on both sides of the Androscoggin River, again, looking for any signs or evidence. We had SWAT resources assigned with those teams. In the event there was a sighting or a safety issue, they could address it. But a lot of that searching, the actual searching, was being done by members of our warden service in several other jurisdictions. In our dive team. So our dive team was working in that tributary area. That's probably the wrong word for it, but basically where the Sabattis meets the Androscoggin, looking for any evidence or individuals in that area. Ultimately finding none, but again, we had to have security presence for that, given we still didn't know where Card was. And the map you have is probably difficult to depict in the slides as far as what was searched, because it's color coordinated, but I see your maps are actually color coordinated. But the orange that you're seeing is that when I described it as the physical chunks that were being picked off were those orange chunks. You also see like some blue squiggly lines. Those are our cadaver dog searches looking for deceased persons. And when I say there was a warden service, I believe, their canines searching those areas for signs of a cadaver, but basically blocking off those chunks. There were several other things that came in around this time. We had a resident off of Frost Hill Avenue report that the night of the incident, the night of that we were down at the boat landing, they heard a single gunshot from the woods to the north on the trail. So we dispatched some SWAT resources to search that wooded area, which came up with nothing. We had another single gunshot from the area of the Left Hand Club in Lisbon. And I think it's important to note, we're now the day before hunting season. So we're starting to get reports of gunshots, which we're having to sort through of what is relevant, what is not. So we had the Border Patrol BORTAC team, which is their SWAT team, available to us at this moment. We sent them out to that area to investigate that. Around noontime or 12:19 p.m., we had what seemed to be a really good tip come in, where there were two 911 hang-up calls from a residence in Durham. There was information that this residence was associated with Card's mother. So given the affiliation and the 911 hang-up calls, this was concerning to us. First responders responded out there, and the first deputy to arrive on scene, their dispatch center couldn't get a hold of them. So this is being relayed to us in the command post, starting getting concerned of that information. So I dispatched the BORTAC team that had been sent out on that search at the Left Hand Club to respond to Durham because we believe there was a life safety issue over there. And they responded out there and immediately set up containment of that residence. We sent investigators out there, detectives and agents to be able to sort through that information, determine, 911 hang-up calls are a pretty routine part of police work, but given, the circumstances, we wanted to investigate it a little bit more. But while this was all happening, we were sending additional resources, armored vehicles there to assist, some more resources. So a group of the Marshal Service showed up, conducted an entry, and was confirmed that Card was not located. And throughout the day here, sorting out some of these low priority, low probability sightings. While this grid search was happening, led by the Warden Service, in the early afternoon of the 27th, I started getting questions about this overflow lot. And
Before we go on to
yeah.
that, I'd like to take a break
sure.
for 5 minutes. I'm
Sure.
cutting everybody down to 5 minutes. But let's leave that right at that point, and we'll come back and go to the overflow. 5 minutes. Right?
we're now into the afternoon of the 27th, and while this grid search was being conducted, led by the warden service, it took them a little while to get there, but they started getting over behind where this overflow lot is. So I'm in the command post and I start getting asked questions because they're reporting back, hey, we're coming upon these trailers, have they been searched? So that request comes to me, hey, have we searched these trailers? And initially it was a phrase to me, have we searched these trailers at Maine Recycling? And I'm like, yes, we have. We searched the trailers at Maine Recycling. And then they come back and they're, well, what about these trailers? And so now they're picking me to a map and basically directing me to the overflow lot. So I then have to go to the folks that actually did the work down there, the SWAT teams that did the work, and send them a message, circled that overflow lot. Did we search these trailers? And there was some back and forth trying to determine whether or not that was, because again, they're looking at Google Earth maps that are not necessarily relating to them of what they were seeing live down there, because there's, those are just images of a parking lot, and obviously things move around in real time. So there was some back and forth there. So kind of made the decision that in this afternoon operational period, kind of the first thing that we were going to do is I was going to send a team of individuals down there to be able to say, yep, the trailers have been searched and cleared and there's nobody there. So I briefed an element from my team and from Massachusetts State Police, and they were going to be assigned to go down there and clear these trailers. And again, like, we are used to systematic clearing in the SWAT world. We systematically clear residences all the time, outside spaces. And so what I relate to them is, I want you to clear these trailers and be able to tell me at 100% there's nobody there. And so they went as far to, because had been some rumors. I mean, we're now 2 days into this, there's starting to be rumors that there's partitions in these trailers and potentially you could be hiding behind a partition. So the team down there went as far as using laser measuring devices to measure the outside of the trailer. And then when they were inside, measure the inside of the trailer to make sure that the measurements were the same, so we weren't missing anything. I mean, when I say systematic, that's how systematic they were down there in that overflow lot.
Can I ask you a question at this point? Is
Absolutely.
thermal imaging, would it have been effective in detecting the presence of,
Not through a barrier.
not through
So all the trailers were searched in that overflow lot?
Yes.
Was there anything found that would indicate that he had hunkered down in any of them?
So he was found in one of the trailers, and that was actually the last trailer that they searched.
But there was no evidence that he had hunkered down
In any of the other ones? No, not that they reported. So that operation, they were briefed of that around 6 and then 6 in the evening, and then they responded down to that area to search.
Can I just ask you, somewhere I've read that Mr. Martin, I believe, the manager of Maine Recycling, raised some question about whether was that information conveyed to you, or maybe I read it somewhere?
About whether we had searched it or?
Yeah, Mr. Martin, I recall, said the overflow lot contains trailers that have stuff in them, and it would be easy for him to get behind.
That was the morning of the 27th. So this is all being relayed to us the 27th, and so this is why we're now trying to do the systematic search to ensure that we're getting beyond this debris.
Information was given to you.
Yes.
Mr. Martin. Okay.
I don't think I had heard the name Mr. Martin, but that information was relayed to me about, debris and all that stuff.
Okay.
6:30 PM in the evening, we had 2, which again seemed very probable sightings in the Richmond and Bowdoin area. Individual driving by saw someone that appeared to be, or at least matched Carr's description, at the end of an ATV trail that intersected with the road. And then when their light shined on that individual, they ran into the woods. Approximately a mile from there, shortly thereafter, a resident independent of this in Richmond reports that they see somebody in their backyard. They went outside and racked a shotgun, and that person ran off. So we deployed some SWAT resources to this area and began 2 canine tracks. One from the ATV location and one from behind that residence. And when I say we, the lead agencies on that were an element from BORTAC, HSI, and then we sent elements from my team, Cumberland County's team in Massachusetts State Police up there to supplement. So that ended up being unfounded, obviously. So I'll kind of get into card being located, just jumping ahead. So as my team got down to the overflow lot, they pulled into one of the openings and stopped on Capitol Ave and then assessed the scene to determine which would be the best way to clear. Because when we're systematically clearing an area, we start at one end, we're gonna clear all the way to the other end so we don't miss anything. So they ended up starting on kind of the far end, away from where card was located. And they began systematically clearing. And so they had a lot of challenges. There were a variety of different doors. They had doors that opened left to right. They had doors that opened vertically. There were doors that had hydraulic lift gates on them that, you know, were blocking the entrance. So they had some challenges with clearing that space. And like was said before, you'd open up some of the doors and bottles and returnables and metal would fall out. So there were some challenges, but they systematically began searching those structures and they came up with a strategy to mark groups of trailers as they searched them. So they would search a group of trailers and then they would basically mark the doors with tape. So they knew at the end of it, they'd be able to say, we got everything. So they go back, double check. All right, every door's got tape on it. We search these trailers. They particularly saw a group of trailers close to one of the entrances that presented a tactical challenge to clear just by the way they were parked. There were a couple of trailers backed into each other where the doors were facing each other and packed really tight together. So they left those for last, knowing that they would be challenging to clear. And it just coincidentally, the last trailer they cleared was the trailer that card was located in. So that trailer had a vertical door that lifted up. A team of individuals from my team were working on opening that door while covering into that opening. And immediately upon opening the door, they saw feet. And that was kind of the initial that there was a person in that trailer. They worked kind of tactically to identify what that was and were able to determine that the individual appeared to be Robert Card. And he was deceased from a parent's gunshot wound to the head, self-inflicted is what it appeared. And that happened, I believe it was 7:47 p.m. And so I get notified of that. The team leader for that team called me, informed me what it was, and let me know that at the time they found him, they observed a handgun next to him and a AR-15 type rifle underneath his body. And they also described some form of load-bearing vest that potentially carried some magazines, but that's how it was relayed to me. So I took that phone call and then immediately notified Incident Command that he was located. There was some back and forth regarding confirming 100% this is the guy we're looking for. We're able to confirm that. And my team members remained on scene there for some scene security until other officers were able to relieve them. And that concluded the tactical operations for this incident. Just in summary, you know, we had a lot of tactical teams there, a lot of resources, over 350 tactical operators for the entirety of the event. Some of these teams that were responding were very large, you know, bringing 60+ operators with them to assist in all their equipment. We had aircraft, we had all kinds of resources to be able to conduct this operation. And in these 48 hours, we conducted 29 tactical operations between those 16 local, regional, state, and federal tactical teams that responded to assist.
Any questions?
When you talked about the team that went into the residence in Durham, I couldn't follow whether or not they broke in, or how did they enter the residence to confirm that he wasn't there?
I don't know how that all went. I just know that team, it wasn't a tactical team. It was a group of, I believe, task force from the Marshal Service that arrived. I don't know how they made entry. They weren't under our command structure with the tactical operations.
Yes.
Looking back on it now, would it be a correct assumption to say that had you guys known about the overflow lot at Maine Recycling, you would have done that same trailer to trailer search on the 26th?
Had we had known, well, I mean, I think it would all depend on the context of the relations, because it's all about prioritizing tasks. And a lot of the operations that took place on the 26th, especially the morning of the 26th, was clearing structures to allow investigators to do work. So some of that stuff takes priority. Like, obviously, we have to conduct a search of his residence because we have to get detectives in there and evidence folks to be able to process that scene, to be able to hopefully give us more intel. Had we had information that led us to believe that it is likely that Robert Card was in the overflow lot, absolutely, that would have jumped the priority list and we would have searched that much sooner.
Did you have, when it was searched on the 27th, doesn't sound like there was any new or more relevant information that he was there necessarily. You just had fewer other tasks to do. Is that sort of?
Yes, it was to answer that question from, again, that systematic search. We're now transitioning to that systematic search in Lisbon. And to answer the questions from those that team led by the game wardens, have these trailers been searched? Because we wanted to include that in that orange chunk that this has been cleared. So it was part of that. And knowing that we had a little bit better tactics and resources to be able to deal with that search is why we did that.
Just one other related question to that. So you did the search you did at the Maine recycling facility on the 26th was a thorough check it off the list kind of search, right? So I guess I'm back to my original question. Had you known then, would it have made sense to would you have considered the search done without checking the overflow lot, had you known about the overflow lot on the 26th?
Had we known that overflow lot was associated with the information that drove us there on the 26th, we would have included that in the search.
I figured that, and I know that. So, okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing further?
By the 27th, you had no new actual intelligence saying he's here, he's there. So you're, at some point, maybe the word is not speculation, but maybe that's what it is. On the 27th, were you wondering whether or not he was actually in the river? Is that one of the higher possibilities of all the things that you were considering?
Yeah, I'll handle that. So that was discussion. Obviously, Sergeant Roy's team is handling most of the intel likely areas. Send a SWAT team. He's very armed and very dangerous. But we got to start looking at everything else. And the pendulum definitely swung on the 27th, where we're not getting any information. He's not showing up on Ring doorbells. There's no hot tips coming in.
It hasn't been seen since
Hasn't been
7:59.
seen. We need to do, it's like out of the movies, and the warden service are very good at it because they use them to find lost people. Basically shoulder searches through these areas. In addition to that, and now we can conclusively say they're clear. Doesn't mean you can't come back into them, but at that moment, they're clear. In addition to that, now we're thinking of the river. And we start Sergeant Stedman's team, along with the warden service team down by the dam, start to search that boat landing area by the parking lot. The dive team searches, I'm a land lover, I'm not a scuba diver, but they're very exhausting and time consuming. So they're able to clear from that boat launch, the little Androscoggin, Little Spatus, down underneath the bridge to the Androscoggin and knock that off. There's no evidence, there's no body. We start, Major Gosselin mentioned, so it's the 27th. We're now planning, what are we doing on the 28th? And part of the plan on the 28th, and I went to Sergeant Stedman, is what is it going to take to clear from that, where the Little Sabatis enters down to the dam, the rivers. We want to clear that. We don't want to have to deal with this anymore, which is about a mile. And so he developed a plan. We had probably the biggest dive operation plan that has ever occurred in this state for the next day with teams, every team in Maine, Portland, Warden Service, Maine State Police, New Hampshire State Police, New Hampshire Warden Service, Massachusetts, Vermont, New York, and Rhode Island or Connecticut, I can't remember, we're all coming with their whole teams. And so we could coordinate river off and start that search. So, that's what we're looking for. And then obviously we're looking at property owned by Card and planning to do grid searches on those, on the Card family. And just taking everything that we knew and starting to check it off the box. And go from there.
Okay.
Couple of nights before this, you mentioned that the Drager case was a big thing on your head in terms of when you found the car parked at the boat launch.
I mentioned that.
Oh, okay. Was that a universal concern? Because did that impact how you did searches everywhere else? Because literally he could do the same thing anywhere along the way if that was happening, right?
Yes.
And so did that slow your response because you worry that the officers and the troopers could be ambushed anywhere along the way, and that's like you delayed some searches and stuff. Did they come into your planning?
Did we plan for that? Yes. Fortunately, as they mentioned, we had more tactical operators than we have members of the state police here. We had over 350. So that gave us the resource to do those searches as we need.
So you were doing the search like you would do on any search with a backup team in case they need to engage an ambush.
Or most of the time with the actual SWAT team. So
Okay.
instead of, we would have them help with the search, clearing the more dangerous areas. And then we had our partners with Warden Service and others come in and do a very thorough grid-like search of those areas.
Those weren't being conducted at night with a guy with a thermal telescope.
Correct. And nor would we, the grid type search needs to be during the daylight so that you can look everywhere.
And if I can, with respect to the overflow lot, the day before, if we had the same information, Doctor, you had asked that question. It's important to point out, we don't know where he is, and we don't know if he's moving around or not. And that entire industrial park is just riddled with places. I think as Sergeant Roy described, transitioning into this different mode and looking to clear these different areas. That certainly is that, and some of the larger wooded areas around there will become priorities. I think the criminal investigation will shed some light on, where this might be going. And this is a huge conversation of where might he be. And thank goodness we found him when we did. Certainly wish we found him earlier. And, but this was a dangerous person in a very dangerous situation.
Thank you. I think that concludes and is a good transition to the investigative operations. So
Thank you very much.
And if Lieutenant Pickering and Sergeant Farley would come forward, we will proceed with that. Just ask you to identify yourselves for us and we'll be pleased to hear from you.
Lieutenant Randall Keaton, Maine State Police. I'm the Major Crimes Lieutenant for the Southern Division. I've been a law enforcement officer since '96. I started at Farmington PD. 2004, enlisted with the State Police. Lieutenant since May of 2022.
Tom Pickering, I joined the state police in 2000. Worked in Troop J, patrolling Western Hancock County for just under 12 years. I was promoted to the Major Crimes Unit North. I worked there for about 8.5 years before I was promoted to a sergeant at the Computer Crimes Unit, now a lieutenant with the state police. I had 14 years on the tactical team during my time as a trooper and a detective.
My name is Chris Farley. I'm one of the sergeants of the Major Crimes Unit South with the primary area of responsibility of Androscoggin County. Been with the state police since 2007, where I patrolled Troop B, so the greater Androscoggin, Oxford, and Cumberland counties. Then I was promoted to detective for 5.5 years, then a sergeant for 4 years as a patrol troop back in the patrol troop, and then a sergeant back in the Major Crimes Unit. Also been a member of the evidence response team for about 8.5 years, about 5 years ago now.
You could proceed with the description of your participation and manner you see fit.
Certainly. So what I will do, what we presented to you is kind of a timeline summary of some of the investigative facts that we have put together over the course of this investigation. I'll cover some of the facts that were touched on prior to October 25th, just a few. And then I will lead into kind of the investigative response of that evening. So just some points. In October of 2022, Mr. Card meets a female who, we'll call her a female acquaintance, whose name will come up during the course of the initial investigation. In December of that year, they end their relationship or friendship that they have. We start getting reports in February of 2023 that Robert Card is reportedly hearing voices, and that's coming to us from interviews with family. The female that we spoke about earlier, the acquaintance, stated that Robert had stopped going to Schmeggy's Bar and Grill in February of 2023 for cornhole, which he was known to frequent. In June of that year, she actually receives a message from Robert stating that he was hearing that others were saying that he was attracted to her children. In July is when he has an incident with members of his military unit at West Point. And on July 16th, he's hospitalized for 14 days in New York because of an issue with his military unit. September 15th, it was touched on earlier by Saginaw Hawk. They receive a complaint from the National Guard. And then we'll skip forward to sometime in early September. Robert Card punches a friend named Sean, who was his roommate at the time.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, sir.
There's missing from this events is the June or July, I can't remember which, the Deputy Carlton's visit with
Yes.
the former wife.
And I believe that was May, if I remember correctly. May.
You were aware of that?
Yes, we were. Oh, I was just trying to highlight some of the prequel and not spend too much time, as I know you had that testimony already. We, in doing some analysis in September 17th, he actually, Mr. Card receives a text from a Ryan. And you see on your slide, kind of part of the text message content. If you would like that, I have the full context of that text message, what was fully sent. Then on September 23rd, 2023 is when the Saginaw Hawk County Sheriff's Office initiates the file 6. And then based on our investigation on October 22nd, 2023 is when Robert Card writes a note on his cell phone where he's having issues with about the issues he's having, that he's had enough and he's trained to hurt people. So that's leading up to October 25th, 2023. At 7:13 that evening, I was notified by the CID Sergeant Levesque from the Lewiston Police Department advising me of an active shooter with multiple deceased at 2 locations in this city. That began the Major Crimes Unit response. I notified Lieutenant Keaton and began the notification process. Knowing the size and the scope and the information that I had obtained, I requested our Major Crimes Unit North to assist us with going to the hospital and making interviews and making contact over there. I knew it was going to be a large undertaking, so we needed some assistance. Then, as normal protocol, at 7:42, I made notified the on-call Assistant Attorney General. They are going to be the prosecuting agency in any homicide investigation in the state. As in common practice, when we have a homicide, as soon as I kind of have an understanding what we have, I will reach out to them to begin our coordination of where the investigation is going to go. I didn't have much other than there were multiple fatalities and the suspect was not in custody. So we began our open line of communication with them. By 7:44, I've already requested the resources of our evidence response team to go ahead and begin their response so they can process the crime scenes. Some of the slides, 7:51, we've already kind of touched on it, is the 911 call at Da Vinci's. And by 8:06, a photo from just in time is released to the public, the photo of the suspect. 8:11 is also when that Walmart distribution report comes in. By 9:18, myself and the rest, some of the other detectives confirm that there are 7 deceased individuals at just-in-time bowling. At 9:20 that evening, what we had done is we knew that there were a lot of witnesses and civilians that were at both just-in-time and Schmenge's bar. So coordinating with Lewiston PD, they will bus to a central location so we could try to conduct interviews right then and there. And that Cumberland County Sheriff's Office, at our request, took charge of that and began coordinating interviews at that location at the Lewiston Armory, starting around 9:20 that evening. At 9:26 p.m. on the 25th, a family member of Robert Card calls into the Lewiston Police Department and says that she believes that that is her brother in that photo that had been released. By 9:20. Yes, sir.
I think one of the 911 transcripts we had was from the Cumberland County PSAP, and somebody reporting it's Robert Card before 9 o'clock that evening.
So Robert Card's name came up, I believe, if I look, it was around early 9 o'clock is when the name came into the command post. I think it was 8:55 is when the name came into the command post. So at that,
Because of the Cumberland PSAP.
I don't know how it came through. I did see that as well. It was in the Cumberland PSAP, but it got to the command post, the name Robert Card. So investigators at that point began initiating an investigation of, okay, who is this Mr. Card? We ran his name through our DMV history, saw his DMV photo, looked at the photo. Okay, that's someone who matches the description of the individual we see. We then ran what's called a reverse registration query. So we took his name and we run it through the system. And what that does is that can produce if there's any vehicles registered to him. And what that produced is that produced a white Subaru. With that, at around the same time, we're trying to get information from Schmenge's bar of they have exterior cameras that show the parking lot. And a heroic effort that night, somebody actually shut the power off inside the bar to prevent Mr. Card from seeing. By doing that, we had to go back in, turn the power on and upload that security footage. As soon as we did that, we got a white Subaru. So we're now we're taking that big scope of who is this individual, because we've had other names earlier. I think Major Hare talked about it, a gentleman in Auburn whose name came up who kind of fit the description. So we're now narrowing our focus to who is this individual that's responsible.
So when the family member at 9:26 calls in saying it is Robert Card, you already had a basis for believing that
Yes.
might be accurate.
Yes, we had a basis, and this is now confirming that she is saying, yes, this is Robert Card, and he is the one that is in that picture. So with that, just shortly thereafter, because we had already started working on that information, we request phone records for Mr. Card under exigency. He is a severe threat to the public. He's a severe risk. So therefore, we request exigency we will apply for a search warrant in the future, but we want those exigent records to see where his phone is at that time. By 9:33, so you're talking about 13 minutes after we get the confirmation that Mr. Card's family is saying that's him, we receive our first location information on the cell phone that is putting his phone device in the Bowdoin area by his residence. But 9:46, the family, Mr. Card's family, I know this was a question, if they were working with us, they came right to the police department, even after already having spoken with us on the phone, to further help our investigation on providing us information of locations, who he could be interacting with, who he had trouble with, and to give us kind of some of that background.
You would describe their conduct as cooperative, would you?
Very much so, yes. So that's at 9:46. We're already starting to continue those interviews with Mr. Card's family. Shortly after is when we confirmed that there are 8 deceased individuals at Schmenge's. At 9:56 is when Lisbon Police starts reporting that they've found the vehicle at the boat launch. By 10 p.m. on the 25th, we confirm that there are 3 deceased individuals along with 12 injured individuals at Central Maine Medical Center in Lewiston. 1 additional individual was transported to St. Mary's Hospital. And then 1 from Central Maine Medical Center was transported down to Portland to Maine Medical Center. Right around this time, at 10 o'clock, further analysis on Robert Card's device records under the exigency revealed that his phone had remained in the area of West Road, which was a known address that he is known to reside at, from 6:03 p.m. on the night of the 25th to the present. What that indicated to us at the time was that his device and his phone was at his residence at the time of the shootings. So therefore, he did not have that device on him. And that was kind of good for us because it showed, okay, that device is there. Now we have to continue our investigative leads based on, we didn't have that avenue, so we had to put that to the side and continue other avenues of the investigation. More family arrives at Lewiston PD around 10 o'clock to continue to be interviewed. Just before 11, the Portland Police Department interviewed the victim at Maine Medical Center. At 11 p.m. on the night of October 25th, the Major Crimes Unit and the Lewiston Police Department conduct the first briefing at the command post at the Lewiston High School. At that time, information that we have and Lewiston has is relayed to first responders and to investigators. We set another brief time for 2 o'clock in the morning just to kind of set up where we're going to go as we're transitioning from the PD to a bigger command post that has been talked about already today. By 11:30 that night, we're starting to interview family and friends and associates of Mr. Card. Those come through interviews previous of names that come up. I know it was talked about earlier about a ex girlfriend that could possibly live in the Lisbon area. We were just given a name, and the name, as is common in our investigations, it's just a name, so we have to do digging on who this individual is. The name had 2 individuals, one that lived in Lisbon and one that lived in the Auburn area. Based on where the car was found, based on his knowledge and information that this individual could be a target and he had some issues with her, I pushed out that information that we wanted to check the Lisbon area first to verify for her safety that she wasn't involved. So by 12:24 on the morning, we've now transitioned into the 26th. Our interviews begin at Central Maine Medical Center with our Major Crimes Unit North. Just after 1 o'clock in the morning, I make formal confirmation to the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, identifying the number of deceased individuals that we have and advise them to begin their response. And they bring a team and bring it down to the command post. And they stage there until being told by the evidence response team and the evidence technicians that they're ready to go in and assist with the removal of the bodies. By 1:30 a.m., approximately 70 interviews had been conducted under the guidance of the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office, to include officers with Cumberland County, Lewiston Police Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, ATF, and some other investigative partners. Completed 70 interviews in that short amount of time between the time of the shooting and 1:30 on that morning. At 2 a.m. is when we hold another briefing is held, and where we transition over to the command post over at Lewiston High School. At that time, some of our detectives that were at Central Maine Medical Center begin making notification to some of the families of the deceased at Central Maine Medical Center while conducting interviews. Starting at 2:12 a.m., MCU detectives began going through lead sheets, call sheets, our calls for service to try to identify any new leads and tips. At 3:05, Robert Card's vehicle is secured at the Maine State Police Crime Lab. At 5:15 in the morning, investigators and Major Crimes are made aware of a white pickup truck in the Schmenge's parking lot with the New Hampshire registration that contains, it's in the parking lot facing towards the building, that had contained 2 rifles and ammunition, along with an open window in plain sight and open view. So that to us was very concerning, because in running the registration plate, it did not come back to any injured individuals or deceased individuals. So we had a truck there that was unaccounted for with 2 firearms in plain view. So that began an investigation onto who belonged to that truck and who was involved. By 5:41, all but 1 individual had been positively identified at just-in-time bowling. At 6:31 in the morning, we finally locate that female in Auburn and conduct an interview with her. She was fine. She was in her residence. She just didn't want to answer her phone, and it just took a little challenge for us to locate her. At 8 a.m. on the morning of the 26th, we participate, Major Crimes does, in the first general briefing at the Lewiston High School. And it's beginning that first operational cycle. By 8:30, all the victims at Schmenge's Bar and Grill had been positively identified. 9:38 in the morning, we had a search warrant signed for Robert Card's residence in Bowdoin, along with his vehicle. At 10 a.m., an arrest warrant was issued for Robert Card, with an arrest charging him with knowing and intentional murder. At 10:50 is when the search warrant for Robert Card's residence was served. At 3:25 on the afternoon of the 26th, the Lewiston Police Department receives information of an individual who's claiming that he may possibly be involved in the incident with Mr. Card. That information, along with the vehicle that had been located, begins us on an investigation to try to, 1, identify who this individual is, locate him, and interview him to see if he is involved. So that starts at 3:25 on the afternoon of the 26th. At 3:35, Major Crimes Unit participates in an investigative briefing. And I believe at that point, the Lieutenant Colonel might touch on it later, but information was leaked to the media from that briefing. Information of things that have been found at a search warrant was released to the media at that time. 4:02 and 4:50, we start doing interviews with some of Robert Card's military associates.
Can I just ask,
Yes, ma'am.
with respect to the interviews with his military associates, what did they tell you?
Without getting, I think you have a copy of the summary of interviews in there. I didn't personally do the interviews, so I'd have to go back and reread the interviews, but they provide us information about the incident that had happened if they were there.
Right, okay, so did they also talk about his functioning prior to the February 2020, like his historical functioning before he became?
We do ask some of those questions without actually getting in for me to reread those interviews and that transcript. That would be the best. I believe we provided those documents to you, those transcripts and those summaries, where those questions are being asked about his mental status, how he's acting, his behavior prior to. I don't recall what they provided offhand without looking at it.
Okay, thank you.
And were these face-to-face interviews or telephone or both?
Some of them were both. I know one was in person. We actually sent someone to New Hampshire to conduct an interview, and then I'd have to look back at this. It says it right on our summary. I just would have to look back to remember offhand.
And you didn't have any problems talking to them at all? They didn't?
No, those interviews that were done were
Voluntary.
Yep. At 7:57 on the 26th is when we just get some formalized search warrants for the 2 crime scenes. They had been processed under consent. At this time, we don't know where Mr. Card is. We're still thinking of the future. We're still thinking of that criminal prosecution. We are operating under consent. Just to dot the i's and cross the t's, we apply for a search warrant to both of those locations. And in that, we include that white pickup truck that has been parked in the parking lot. At 8:20, that evening, so on the night of the 26th, with the help of Lewiston Police Department, Lewiston PD and the Major Crimes Unit, locate and interview the individual who was stating that he was involved. Some of that information that he provided a location of where he and Mr. Card may have been, which was then relayed to the command post, which I know Sergeant Roy talked about a location that evening that they went and checked, and that's where that information came. That interview concluded around 11:24 that evening. In that time, we began legal process on his Facebook accounts.
And was that individual ever charged with anything?
He wasn't. I spoke with the Attorney General's office. The information came to us from a third party. He didn't come to the PD and say, I'm involved. He came via a third party, gave it to us. They were concerned. They provided to us, and we had to follow up on it, because we wanted to make sure that there was only one actor. With that, he was not charged, because when confronted, he did lie to us, and there is no crime in the state of Maine to lying to police. We get lied to all the time. So he's not being charged at this point.
Sergeant, when you get this information from your interviews, just can you highlight the process to get to incident command to make it an actionable thing? Like if you get intel, how does it move up and?
So if we get intel on where Mr. Card could,
Yeah.
they say, so what we would do is we would relay it up it would come to me from the detectives, myself, Lieutenant Keaton or Sergeant Ross. We were the 3 MCU supervisors kind of supervising that investigation. That would come to us, and then it will go up to either, if I was in direct contact with Sergeant Roy, I know the first night, the night of the 25th, a lot of the information was coming directly to me, and then Sergeant Roy and I have an open communication, so I would go direct with him. The further along we got, I would relay it to Lieutenant Stevenson, who was in charge of the manhunt application, and then he would relay it and put it on a list, and they would go from there.
And you were located at the high school, right, too?
I was, yes.
So that means, okay, right there, okay.
Yep.
It was more like we were a switchboard
Okay.
as a supervisory level, because we had stuff coming in from the tip
Yeah, yeah.
line that would come to us, and then we disseminated across.
From either the tip line or the Card family, when was the earliest juncture it went at, even though I know you could have been in 100 places, but when Maine Recycling was even on the game board?
So that first evening, one of the first interviews that were conducted by detectives that evening, she says that that's a place that he used to work, was Maine Recycling. These are locations that he used to work. I know there was First Fleet in Auburn. There was other bars and other locations. There was Gowell's Market. There was Mixer's Bar and Grill that the family provided to us as locations that he either had issues with or he worked. So there was a multitude of information that was coming in, and it wasn't anything that said he's going there or he goes there. These are just places of that he had known to interact with or be employed by.
At that point, it wasn't apparent to you that, it doesn't seem that it was apparent to you that that was a place where he had some difficulty with thinking that people, and perhaps actually people accusing him of being a pedophile.
There's nothing that I can indicate that says that. It's people saying that he used to work there.
Yeah.
And no one theorized, perhaps it might have, that he might have been headed there.
So I think the theorizing is kind of it's not something we do. We act based on facts and information. And we have to go based on the facts and what we know then. We know at that time that his car is found in Lisbon. Maine Recycling is there, yes, but you also have an ex-girlfriend that he possibly has issue with who lives there. All the stuff that Sergeant Roy touched on, and we have to work on that intel of what we have. We can't just kind of theorize that, well, he could go there. We know he doesn't have a device. We went so far as to send detectives to the local Walmart to check on phones and track phones that have been purchased to try to locate if maybe he had gone in and bought another phone in another method to make sure that he wasn't having that option to communicate with any individual.
And I wasn't suggesting that you were theorizing. I wondered if anyone theorized to you
No,
by a tip or a?
no,
piece?
we had, everyone would, I mean, Maine Recycling, I think there were 821 tips that came into the command post over the course of that 48 hours. And it would just be check Maine Recycling, check or check here, check there. It was nothing that said, I know he goes there and I know he likes to hang out in this location.
Thank you.
With the advantage of hindsight, which none of us have, except when we're not involved. It seems that it's likely, or it's possible at least, that all three of these locations, Schmenge's and the Just in Time and Maine Recycling, were areas where he had difficulty thinking that people were talking about him or people were actually talking.
I can say specifically for Just in Time and Schmeggy's, I'm not so sure about Maine Recycling.
So, did you review the various affidavits for search and arrest warrants before they were presented to a judge?
I did.
Because, the affidavit for Robert Card's telephone is by, Blake Conrad, I
Yes.
assume that's detective, and he says that, Robert's brother told Conrad about Maine Recycling at about 2:57 in the morning
Yes.
of the 26th. So that was
That was-
specific information from a family member.
So he said Maine Recycling, he didn't say he would go there. I think that's kind of where the information came. They were saying Maine Recycling is a location that he worked at. He could go, but he also could have gone to Mixers. So they were just giving that to us. The time that Detective Conrad, that's actually the second time Detective Justin Huntley earlier in the evening, in the initial interview, actually had that information. And as soon as that information, that 11 o'clock briefing information was relayed out of those locations and pushed out, because nothing was saying it was an individual. It's hindsight's being 2020. That's where he knows. But at the time, we didn't know where he went, and we had to look at every option.
One other quick question is typically just, is it do you more heavily weight information coming from like family members of someone you're looking for, someone who really knows the person you're looking for, versus sort of more random tips?
I think it's both. The family does, if they're willing to provide information, we'll go on that, but we're also going to use the facts. We're going to take their information, provided with the facts that we have at the time. So they're saying Maine Recycling, we knew he worked there. That is a location.
Thank you.
And looking at the tip line too, we have proximity and frequency. So if we see something in the tip line multiple times, that means that other people see this, and that lends more credence to that.
Also, so you obviously conducted a criminal investigation, while your colleagues were pursuing a manhunt. Was there any coordination between, you all with respect to interviews? Or were you going to do your interviews and they were going to do their interviews of the same people because you were pursuing different tracks?
Actually, that's what makes this case kind of very unique, is the detectives did both in their interview. They would start their interview with the fact finding. How do you know he's involved? What was he acting like before? And then they would transition into, where is he going? Who could he have an issue with? What location could he be going to? So they actually did, which is very unique in this situation, of they were conducting an investigative interview, and then they would transition right into the apprehension or the manhunt interview in the attempt so that we could get it at one time. Obviously, we may have to go back if maybe they've had new information, and go back to ask follow-up questions about certain locations.
Sergeant, in many sub-jurisdictions, they have threat assessment units. Do we have that in state police, a threat assessment unit that can work in conjunction with crime investigation?
We do not. I would love to have a threat assessment unit. Our threat assessment is done from a tactical standpoint by a tactical
In terms of
commander.
looking at overall, because I know, I used to work in DC, the Capitol Police would have one, and then a department would have it. Just looking at collecting all this stuff and identifying, okay, I think there's so-and-so individual, a center, or whatever may be at risk, and we need to now align up whatever we do to protect it. So this sounds like you jack of all trades in this scenario, basically.
I think we work as a team. You hear me, but in reality, it's a team of detectives that spanned York County to Aroostook County, working together to provide that information and then relaying that information to the right direction that it needed to go, and then go from there.
You couldn't continue.
So we'll finish up with the interview with that individual, ended at 11:24 that evening. But at the conclusion of that interview, we still had some more follow-up to do. We were pretty confident that he was just someone who wanted to insert himself into the investigation. And then, we will interview him later the next day, at which time he tells us he lied to us. So we've already we get a search warrant for Robert Card's cellular phone early on the morning of the 27th at 12:17 a.m. We've already touched on a report of an identifier who calls the suicide hotline saying that he's Robert Card. And then early that morning, that's deemed to be unfounded. Through the evening, we're still trying to verify that the individual places himself there, that we rule out later at 5:45. We issue a search warrant for his Facebook account. And then also, while this is going in at 7:45 in the morning of the 27th, we get reports of a possible victim from just-in-time bowling that may be unaccounted for. So we begin assigning individuals to that to go look in to verify if that's true or not. So 8:30 a.m. on the morning of the 27th, the New Hampshire State Police Major Crimes Unit locates the individual of the white truck, the registered owner of that white truck, who informs us that he had just recently sold the truck to an individual who was injured in the shooting, and that individual was just one that at the time was in the ICU and unable to communicate with us, so we just couldn't verify that. And we verified that truck is no longer involved by 8:30 in the morning. By 11:30 on the morning of the 27th, HSI and Auburn Police locate that individual who said that he knew somebody who was unaccounted for just in time. And it turned out to be a local individual who was just trying to insert himself into the investigation, and he made that up as well. At 2:42, I touched on it real quick earlier, but on the 27th, we actually sent a detective to New Hampshire to interview Robert Card's military supervisor in New Hampshire.
Just the one interview?
There was one earlier with his first sergeant.
Sorry, yeah, the New Hampshire was just Captain Jeremy Reaver.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And there was, you heard earlier testimony to the effect that somebody from Army CID showed up at the command center. Did you have any interaction with that individual?
I think Lieutenant Gibbs can speak to
The
that.
two of them actually showed up.
Were they asked to show up or did they just appear?
They appeared and offered, assistance, and I directed them over to our command post to register, and
And did they indicate why they were there?
they wanted to help with the investigation and add information.
And do you know who ultimately spoke to them?
Not without researching, but I believe they gave statements about who to talk to in the military, because they were sent there by their commanders. And I think that's what led to the interview with Captain that next following day.
Before you move on.
Yes, sir.
Another one of the words that you obtained was Detective Enzo was for the infotainment in the Subaru, in the electronics. Have you ever received a response from Subaru for that?
So that is still out. Our agency, and no one in the state of Maine has the ability to conduct that analyzation of that infotainment center. It was sent to the New York State Police, where it's still being analyzed at this time.
But it may tell you where the car was earlier in the evening of the 25th, and if he drove around at all after he left Shemenji's.
Without speaking too much into what that has for capabilities, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been promised that these infotainment centers are gonna provide a GPS guided map, and I haven't seen it happen yet. So I don't know specifically what information will come off of that, but this is an older model Subaru, so
But you're still waiting on that.
We are still waiting on that, yes.
But Lieutenant Pickering has done a lot of extensive work with video capture, and I think he's done pretty good job of mapping.
Sure. I'm not gonna kick the broom out of your hand, so.
I think really all that else that I have to touch on is that, the last page, just kind of to give you an overall synopsis of kind of some of the Maine State Police responses and resources. Over 100 Maine State troopers responded to Lewiston over the 3-day period. And that included, I think, all but 2 Maine State Police Major Crimes Unit detectives. So you had detectives as far south as York County all the way up to Aroostook County. Over 70 Maine State troopers responded to Lewiston within the first hour. Over 140 private and commercially owned properties have been checked for video surveillance. In the 2-day period, so between the 25th and October 27th, over 200 people were interviewed. I think the chairperson, you touched on it earlier, this 1 terabyte of data in this case file so far, which is, I think, to date, the biggest case file I have ever seen. The lead sheets that we created through the command post yielded 821 leads that were followed up on by New Hampshire State Police, Portland Police, the Brunswick Police Department, our recruits who helped us with that. And then the New Hampshire State Police sent up a team to their major crimes unit, and they did 14 of the 19 autopsies they attended for us. They documented, collected evidence, and passed along information to us, which is a long, time-consuming process.
Have the results from the analysis of his cell phone been received?
I guess, what, are you looking for the cell phone device, the cell phone record? There's,
The calls made and received?
yes, that we have that information, yes.
Quick question. So prior to the shooting, Maine State Police was not aware of probably Card being a threat or anything like that?
No, I was not, no.
Okay, and because I know there's all this work that was being done for a couple months before that, several months. Should those have been escalated? I don't, I just need some education because like a lot of it was handled by local jurisdiction, but it was spanning over several jurisdictions. And was some of that should have been escalated to Maine State Police? They say, hey, we have a concern here. I don't know if this is a crime will happen.
I think they can do that to the colonel.
If you look at how Maine's set up
Yeah.
and how patrol is kind of throughout the state of Maine, it's really just a hodgepodge of law enforcement services. In the rural areas, you're either going to be covered by the state police or the county sheriffs. And depending on where the call came into, in other words, who's making the complaint, and that complaint came into the Saginaw Sheriff's Department, they'll become the primary agency for that type of a call. And whatever the call might be, it could be criminal mischief, terrorizing, whatever, domestic violence, whatever it is, they will become the primary agency. Now, agencies can certainly help each other out if asked, but we would not take over a county sheriff's or municipality's criminal investigation unless we were asked to by them, which sometimes happens, or we would work, collaboratively together if, burglaries that go into multiple jurisdictions. But this case was housed with the Saginaw Sheriff's
There's no guidance to local jurisdictions say, hey, certain crimes, you may need to escalate to at least inform the state police. Like if someone says, just going around the state to do some serious damage, is that something that still reside with the local or?
As the primary investigative body, there are ways of sharing information. We have our MIAC, the Information and Analysis Center, certainly through bulletins, but that's just information sharing. It wouldn't transfer the responsibility unless you're talking a homicide investigation, and with the exception of Bangor and Portland, they would come to us.
So this is,
So Sergeant Farley, I appreciate your summary of the timeline you did, and I just want to go through some of the details regarding the firearms. And just want to make sure that my understanding of the timeline is consistent with the work you've done.
Okay, I'll answer what I can, and then I'm actually gonna refer some of the firearms questions, depending on what you ask, to our evidence response team. They may be able to answer some of those as well.
Okay. I think that we'll go through it, and certainly somebody else can answer if you can. May 3rd is the day that Robert Cart's son contacted or was interviewed by Androscoggin Sheriff's Office. And his, sorry, excuse me, Saginaw Sheriff's Office. And the SRO about his father's mental health and possession of firearms, right?
Yes.
Then 2 months later, on July 6th, Card purchased the murder weapon.
That is correct, yes.
And he passed the background check and received the firearm that day.
I don't know what, hold on, I will have an answer on what day he purchased the firearm. July 6th is when he purchased the firearm. That's all I can say that was provided to us on the sheets.
Okay, thank you. And it was a 308.
Yes,
That's different. It's been reported as an AR-15, but it's actually a 308, which is a different firearm.
it's a 308 caliber semi-automatic rifle.
Okay.
I will, that's what I can tell you. I think the best course of action is our evidence response teams, who's next. They'll be able to kind of explain that a little bit better.
Okay. And then about 10 days after he purchased the murder weapon, he was admitted to the Four Winds Psychiatric Hospital in New York.
Correct.
And got out, he still had possession of those firearms after he was released, right?
Correct.
And in August, he was prescribed olanzapine, which is an antipsychotic.
Yes.
And on September 15th, a fellow Army reservist forwarded his threats about the Saco Reserve Center or the Army Reserve Center in Saco, right?
Yes.
And then on October 25, we went into just in time, and he was in there for 45 seconds, right?
Yes.
And he shot 18 times.
The evidence response, they'll be able to give you a better understanding.
And then he went into Shemanji's, and he was in there for 72 seconds, right?
Yes.
And he shot, again, should I ask the,
You should, they'll be able to give you they'll be able to answer that question better than I can. I have a general idea, but they have more intimate knowledge than I do.
okay, thank you.
Let me ask, Ann, is the 4 o'clock shutdown hard? Is that we have to be out of here by 4?
I have to ask the person and she's shaking her head, no.
As long as you want the room, it's yours.
Oh, okay. All right, because we can call these some of them are here, I assume, Colonel.
Yes, Chair, Mr. Chair, that both of the evidence response team members are here and could probably get them in.
Let's make sure we've concluded with these and then we'll call them forward. It would be good to finish this. If we can today, it would be good for you folks, I'm sure. At least finish it until we come back with further questions. Okay, anything on these folks?
Yes. With respect to what is and isn't reported to the MIAC, is that left to the individual discretion of the department?
To the department investigating the crime, yes, they would have to reach out, and it happens probably daily, 3-4 times. MIAC bulletins are coming out, and they can be anything from fraud to help us identify this person in a shoplifting case to something more serious where it's officer safety. So yeah, it's very frequently used by law enforcement agencies across the state.
So, I heard you say that it is not, even though the state police might have jurisdiction, it is not your practice to interfere with an ongoing investigation unless invited in. So if an This question, excuse me, well, could have been explored more fully with Sergeant Pappas, but I'm able to do that, so I'll ask all of you. If, at the time of his encounter with, Sergeant Schofield, his assistance had been requested, or if he had requested assistance from the Maine State Police at any other time, what options would you have been able to provide to successfully conduct the welfare check of Mr. Card, knowing what was known at that time, which was that he was armed and dangerous and had made threats to shoot up the Saco Armory?
We would have assisted them in any way that they wanted us. And if we were brought into that type of conversation with any law enforcement agency, we would offer up people like Sergeant Roy and his team of people to do a risk assessment. Certainly our criminal investigators. Anytime a law enforcement agency comes to us and asks for help, or vice versa, we ask the sheriff's office for help too. We would extend that and provide all of our resources for them to, what do you need? What's the best way to proceed? Certainly if our people are involved in an operation, if it's a tactical operation, the tactical team will take over. That will be something they would do. But if we're in an assisting role, as long as our concerns are met that it's being done properly and safely, we remain in an assisting role.
No, I understand that, but I'd like to know what sort of assistance could have been provided. I understand the tactical team could have been invited in to do an assessment. What else in the way of assistance could have been provided by you if asked?
Investigative assistance, MIAC could have gotten involved. Advice on anything from yellow flag law, anything they want from us, we would be able to provide from them.
You could have found out, for example, where he was employed and his back and forth, and
if they invited us to
plan an intervention in the traffic mode rather than in his trailer.
If we were asked to come in and if that conversation had continued with, yeah, can you help me out here? I'm stuck, then we'd help any law enforcement agency out with whatever they needed, whether it be a criminal investigation or how do we make contact with this person? It depends on the circumstances, but those circumstances, if asked, we would certainly do everything we can to help them.
And would you, I promise, just, if asked, would you have been able to provide help with respect to the engagement of mental health resources?
Absolutely, in any circumstance. We have behavioral health coordinators, 5 of them throughout the state. And they specifically help out in a variety of things, but mental health primarily, domestic violence, substance abuse, elder abuse, right on down the line, wherever they can help out. And they're kind of a liaison between our troopers and the resources that are available. So we have that, and certainly we would bring that resource in on any circumstance where requested to do so.
Along that line, if Sergeant Pappas were asked to help and he established that there was a basis to charge terrorizing, since Counterman, the Supreme Court's decision in Counterman versus Colorado, has the state police been charging people with terrorizing in Maine?
The only place that we've seen that come up is with respect to the prosecutorial districts. Some have put out information about this is an issue. Others have done nothing. So I think I'd have to look into which district had that problem. I have not heard anything from the ground up, from troopers to our commanding officers, that this has been a particular issue. But I know that does exist. That conversation has existed in certain prosecutorial districts.
But you don't have a policy statewide that we are not charging terrorism cases?
No.
And in terms of the yellow flag law, there's obviously it wasn't used too often before October. Um, were your, troopers available and your detectives available for, sheriff's offices, to assist in yellow flag, petitions?
If we were asked by them, absolutely. One of our lieutenants, Lieutenant Mike Johnston, is very familiar in the yellow flag training piece to Maine law enforcement, even prior to it. And the light colonel is not here anymore. He's back over there, sorry. He also worked on legislation, crafting the law with certain legislatures that were supporting the bill. So, our agency has a good working knowledge of it, and certainly has trained a lot of people on it, and certainly, and as it has evolved to where it is today.
Were you aware of the threat to the Saco base? At the time the threat was conveyed?
No.
Okay, and so it was our understanding that there was a considerable efforts were underway to make sure that that base was safe based on that threat, but Maine State Police wasn't involved at all in that. Saco didn't reach out.
No, I have no personal conversations with the Saco chief, who I know very well, and our Southern Field Troop Commander, that would cover York County, did not convey that to us, and probably wouldn't unless Saco reached out to him specifically.
Thank you.
Yes, Dan.
Lieutenant, you indicated that there were 2 Army individuals who came to the command post.
Yes,
Do you know their names, and did you receive any reports from them as you were gathering all the reports together for these matters?
I did not. I made that connection between Sergeant Farley and there because there was a relay of reports between the groups. They wanted our information and we needed some of their information as well. So there was a back and forth that was laid out that day with the Captain Renhall or Reamer.
Okay, but since that time, have you received any report? The state police have been gathering reports to assist us or to assist the commission in doing their investigation. Have you received any reports from the Army on that?
I think we received some Army records. I'd have to go back into the case file and double check, but they have emailed me as well. But I know we have some military records in our case file.
I have not seen, I've looked at the file. Lieutenant Pickering would probably be the most well-versed in the actual, everything that's been passed on to you folks.
I think the files we did receive, where it came from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, I think, provided us some documents. And I think that's where I don't think it came directly from the Army, but it was some records from the FBI.
I don't think it's what you're referring to, though. I don't think there's any.
No.
I'm wondering about whether
Army,
you wrote any
investigator.
reports
No.
while at the command center.
Oh,
Just like you guys have lots of, I reported this time and this is what I did, and this is what I said, and this is who I interviewed. Do you have any of those kinds of reports from them?
no, none, we have none of those.
And have you received any direct reports since the night of this incident until Mr. Card was found from either the New Hampshire State Police, the helicopter pilot and people inside the helicopter who was doing the search the night the car was found? And or any other activities that New Hampshire State Troopers participated in?
So the report that you requested for the New Hampshire, I have received that. That'll be in the next packet that comes to you. And the rest of the New Hampshire State Police reports would have already gone in and been given to the commission in the past.
And either Lieutenant Keaton or Lieutenant Pickering, you folks know who the first responders were that were on the trail by the boat landing the night his car was found?
I've reviewed the file. I haven't seen where that was reflected in a report, where they had gone out onto that from any local officers.
That's it.
Nothing further for these gentlemen. And perhaps Colonel, the evidence group could come up and answer the question that Mr. Dilworth was asking, and we can see if there are any other questions of the other folks here. Yes, Ron? Yeah. Well, the
Thank
evidence
you very
folks, come
much.
forward. Thank you.
Right there, Council.
Okay, if you could. Okay. Can we find out? Why don't you find out? Just checking to see if the interpreters can stay beyond 4. So. Not that we want to go beyond 4, but in the event that we do. $4:30, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. And we give thanks to our interpreters every time we have one of these sessions. And it's doubly thanks today for being willing to stay beyond 4, but we hope you don't have to. So, okay, would you gentlemen introduce yourselves?
I'm Scott Bryant. I'm a sergeant with the state police. This is my 29th year. I was a patrol trooper in Waldo County for 8 years. I was a detective in Major Crime Central for 13 years. The last 8 years, I've been the evidence response team commander. And I've been on the evidence response team since it was started 23 years ago.
My name is Larry Rose. I've been on the state police since 2000. For 15 years, I was a trooper. Primarily, I worked rural patrol in Cumberland County. In 2015, I was promoted to detective, where I was assigned to Major Crime South, handled primarily homicide investigations. I've been a member of the evidence response team since 2008. And here 3 years ago, I was promoted to sergeant, where I oversaw, was the lab sergeant or at the Maine State Police Crime Lab. And most recently, I've been transferred to Major Crime South, where I assist with supervising the major crimes investigations there.
Perhaps go to you, Toby in Houston.
Okay, thank you. The first has to do with the weapon itself. It was a 308, not an AR-15, correct?
Correct.
And do you know the difference? Can you describe the differences for us, the characteristics of a 308 versus an AR-15?
308's a bit higher caliber, more higher caliber. It's the same type of platform. It's called an AR-10 platform. AR-15 is like a 223 or 5.56. It's a bit more powerful cartridge.
Could you speak up, Sergeant?
Yep. 308's a little more powerful of a cartridge than a 5.56 or a 223.
Okay, and in terms of they're both I mean, they are generally semi-automatic, correct?
Correct.
What is the magazine capacity of this firearm?
The magazine that was in it at the time that it was found was a 25 round magazine.
Did you find other magazines too?
Yes.
And what were they?
After the search warrant was started, there was 6 total magazines located. One was a 10 round magazine, one was a 5 round, one was a 25 round, there was another 25 round, and then there's a 20 round. Total cartridges counted were 77.
And where did you find those magazines?
In the Subaru.
Okay, let's go to just in time. Did you find casings?
Yes, we did.
And how many casings did you find?
So on scene, there were 18 casings.
So does that indicate to you that he shot the firearm 18 times?
Well, at least 18 times, yes, there were 18 casings.
Okay, what? There might have been other casings that were not recovered?
When I'm doing a search, I'm always thinking +1, so I'm always thinking maybe there's one more. There's always a possibility that there is one more. They're casings, usually they're smaller.
And you did that in 45 seconds?
Yes.
And how many people were shot just in time?
I don't know the exact number of victims that were shot. I know that victims on scene when I got there were 7.
Fatalities?
Fatalities, yes.
And how many injured?
That I don't know for sure.
Yeah, that's probably better what happened for the investigators again.
Okay. And then there were 4 live rounds as well, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And can you tell why they had not been fired?
So these 4 rounds were located in the same area where there was a magazine. There was a magazine with a capacity of 25 that was located on the floor as well. I had been asked if it was possibly him trying to clear a jam. I did review the videos of the incident, and it looks like where he does have some sort of jam or malfunction. I can see him charging his weapon is towards the front or the front desk of the bowling alley. Where this magazine is located is not at the front desk, though it's off towards the side where he has a altercation with two of the victims. So it appears that during that altercation, that magazine ends up on the ground. I can't tell you exactly how it ends up on the ground, but it's in that same area where the altercation takes place.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand it. So he was in the front of the bowling alley and 2 people rushed him?
That's correct.
And he ended up shooting both of those people?
That is correct, yes.
Do you think that the jam happened before or after those 2 people rushed him?
On the video, you can see him charging as the 2 individuals are rushing him.
So they might have taken that opportunity to try to tackle him?
Possibly, yes.
Okay. And again, that magazine was nearby, but not right at the spot where he was confronting the 2 attackers?
Correct. It was found near one of the victims where the actual incident had occurred.
Okay. And at Shamanji's, he was in there for 1 minute and 12 seconds. How many shots did he get off?
We recovered 36 really fired cartridge casings and 1 empty 25 round magazine.
How many people were shot at Shamanji's?
I don't know the total number of people shot. I know there was 8 victims there when I got there.
8 fatalities?
Yeah.
We don't have anything else on there.
Can I follow up on, got some time? You probably can't say for sure if this is what happened, but is it consistent with him firing 1 shot? And with a semi-automatic, that would, in theory, automatically load the next bullet from the clip into the firing chamber, correct?
So maybe I can explain it like this. The magazine that was found on the ground had 22 cartridges in it. The capacity of that magazine is 25 plus 1. You could actually fit 1 more round in that magazine than what's stamped on the magazine itself. There were 4 cartridges that were found around that magazine. Mathematically, it's possible that all 4 of those were in the magazine initially and that it fell out. But all 4 of them could fit in that magazine.
But does it suggest that he did not have a live round in the chamber? And therefore he had the presence of mind to eject that clip and put in another one so that he could continue firing. And that's why you had 4 unfired rounds plus a almost full clip on the ground.
He fires almost immediately when he walks into the bowling alley.
One shot.
1 shot, correct. And I don't think that seeing those rounds there suggests anything as far as him reloading a magazine. You can't see that on the video. And you can see that he's actually in an altercation with these two people from the bowling alley. I can't make a determination as to whether or not there was a round that was jammed in the cartridge or in the magazine itself. I can't make that determination from what I see on the scene.
Now, if a round misfired, there'd be an indentation on the primer.
Possibly, yes. Depends on how it's chambered.
Has anybody looked at that at the lab?
The magazine and the weapon were submitted to the lab. I'm not sure that the 4 rounds that were found around the magazine were submitted to look at those.
But if it misfired, there'd be a live round in the chamber, but you couldn't, you'd have to get it out of there in order to load another round in.
Correct, correct.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Based on the analysis in each of the places, did he penetrate deep into the establishment, or did he just come in the door, fire rounds and get out?
So speaking for just in time specifically, he comes in through the front door. I think the altercation does take up time, allows other people, at least gives them a little bit more time. He does then go to the right, walks around where there's some bowling balls. And then there's like another island of bowling balls where he comes around and he's only in there for 45 seconds. He does not go all the way to the back of the bowling alley. He stays pretty much there towards the front of the lobby.
So I'm surmising this, of course, that probably the delay, he was hoping to hit 2 spots. The delay of time exactly. I don't have time here. I gotta move on. And that's why he left just in time quickly.
I'd be speculating as to why he left, but certainly I think having that altercation took time. Even if it was just a few seconds, it took time.
And how long was he totally at Schminke's?
45
This
seconds.
is roughly the same time too.
Oh, at Schminke's?
Yeah.
I think it was 72.
Those are long.
But I can answer your question about things if you want.
Yeah.
Peggy's, he goes in to the front door, turns to the right where there's some pool tables.
Yeah.
He starts firing and immediately when he comes to the door, fires towards the pool tables. And to the right of that, there's like the cornhole boards. He continues firing in that way and then he makes his way out like an arcade door.
Oh, he didn't go out the same way he came in?
No, he did.
Okay, so he sounds like he's familiar with how to get out, at least.
I believe he's been there before.
Okay.
Were you able to tell, somebody at Schminke's turned off the power?
Yeah.
Can you determine how soon after the power was turned off he left the building?
I don't know how long that was.
Was his weapon, so let's assume the power's cut at Schminke's and it's dark. Would he have been able to see with his, with his scope weapon in that dark, or?
What he appeared to be doing, he had a laser sight on his rifle.
Yeah.
And whatever the laser sight was on, it seemed to be targeted that way.
So was the rifle, did it have a night scope in effect, or was it just a laser?
He had a scope, it wasn't a night scope, he had a scope and a laser. So he
Sorry.
had a scope and a laser. It wasn't a night scope, but it was an optic with a laser also on the weapon.
No, thank you.
How this may be irrelevant, but just for my own knowledge, how is there a length of time that it takes to fire a semi-automatic? I mean, how fast can you fire a semi-automatic as opposed to an automatic, which is almost one after the other?
You can fire it as fast as you can pull the trigger.
With the use of the scope and the laser, would the laser provide any lighting or ability for him to use the scope even though the lights were turned off?
You can use the laser in the darkness, no problem.
And that would help him see what he was shooting at?
Well, not see, but whatever the laser is gonna hit is where the bullet's gonna strike.
But did the lasers allow him to, even if it's just like a pinpoint, essentially, could you see what was on that pinpoint, or was it just firing in blind at that, after it was dark?
Be hard for me to tell. I mean, obviously, when somebody shuts the lights off, your eyes got adjusted night vision. So it takes seconds to do that, but if he was targeting something on the wall, for instance, like that clock when the light went out, if he moved the laser across the wall and it was on that clock and he fired, it would hit the clock.
Was there still emergency lighting inside after the lights were hit?
I don't know the answer to that.
Sergeant, was any of the victims shot behind cover? I mean, it's a high caliber weapon, so that means they can probably punch through a bunch of stuff if they need to. So were there, so most of the victims he had in both places, were they people in line of sight or people ducking behind and just aiming?
I know in just in time, there were at least two people that I know that were behind bowling balls who appeared to have been shot behind the bowling balls. But there were other people that you could see the laser light as he's going around. And you can see some of the shots occur as the laser light crosses somebody.
I believe the same with the Schmiggies, like behind cornhole boards and things like that. So
There is an accompanying presentation for the gentleman. It's under the yellow tab if you have any additional questions. I don't know if you wanted them to go through. There's some photos associated with that as well.
Yeah. We have time if you, I hope we can be cognizant of their need.
Only thing that we haven't covered is where he was recovered. I want to go over that.
Yeah.
Yes, right. That's towards the end of the presentation.
When you called there, I mean, if he was found at 7-something PM, right, on the 27th, when did you guys arrive?
we arrived at 8:49 PM. We notified it. He was found at 7:47. And by the time we got there, it was 8:49.
Right there, could have read it. Yeah.
So at that point, his body was still in place and everything else is still in place.
There was a tactical team member securing the trailer. And when Sergeant Rose and I got there, we waited for a few minutes for the medical examiner's office to get there so we could remove the body. There was a trailer, a roll-up door on the back of the trailer, like Sergeant Roy said. The back of the trailer is quite high, probably 3.5, 4 feet high. But it takes some getting, takes some doing to get up into it. We rolled the trailer, door up. He was laying, in the trailer. He had a Smith & Wesson M&P 40 with him. There was a 40 caliber cartridge casing near him, and there was an AR-15 underneath him.
How much unused ammunition was in the trailer? He obviously used one cartridge on himself. Was there a lot of unused ammunition? It's probably in there, and I apologize for.
It is, but I'll read it to you.
Okay.
With the Smith & Wesson M&P 40, he had one cartridge in the chamber, 14 cartridges in the magazine, and he had 2 spare cartridges with him. So there was a total of 2 spare magazines. So there's a total of 45 40 caliber cartridges for the handgun. In the Smith & Wesson M&P 15 5.56 caliber, he had 1 cartridge in the chamber, a magazine with 30 rounds in it. He had 7 total magazines of 5.56 cartridges, totaling 211 rounds.
Had someone encountered him alive in that trailer? He was essentially.
Would have been a very bad spot for somebody to open that door up, and he was looking down on you with a really good vantage point for him. So it would have been a death trap.
Yeah.
And he had plenty of steel equipment around him to use for cover as well.
With a door that goes up, you'd have to be standing in front of the door in order to lift it up.
Yeah, it was a very dangerous spot. Yeah, for sure.
Either that or have a very long arm.
I think they mentioned earlier about items that were in the trailer, like Sergeant Rose said, that trailer, I believe, was full of like dumpster equipment, heavy metal equipment. The very back of it was the only thing that was kind of empty. That's where he was. Yeah.
So, also, by the time you got there, I presume the trailer was already open the whole time until you got there, correct?
They had closed it.
They did close it.
They did close
Okay.
it.
So, I know there was a lot of questions about the time of death for, Mr. Card, and I think this range from here is 8 to 12 hours. Can you remind me, like, that night, how cool is it? And also, did the ambient temperature change within the trailer? Because, you know, trailer's always hotter-ish, colder, depends. So
It was definitely warmer in the trailer. It was quite warm that night, if I remember right. The next day it was quite warm too, because we went back the next day, the night flew was going. Take some aerial photos of it, and it was quite warm the next day as well.
So if he had indeed shot himself in the trailer earlier, his rate of decomposition would be quite different from outside because it's so much hotter inside. Could it be? I don't know how hot it was.
Rigor mortis is very variable depending on temperatures, so I'm definitely not a doctor, but he was in rigor mortis when Sergeant Rose and I placed him in the body bag.
How do you determine before opening, again, this may be a question that should have been directed elsewhere, but thermal imaging wouldn't help you to determine whether there was somebody inside the trailer. So how, before opening that door, do you make some determination whether there's somebody in there or not that's alive?
Probably a good question for Sergeant Roy.
I missed my, you still do?
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Colonel, I've had this question. I'm not sure you're the right person, but I'm gonna put it to you. The all-knowing Brian McMaster has given us some data about the use of the yellow flag law since October 25th. And there's been an increase. What do you attribute that to?
October 25th.
Everybody's just,
I think it's a combination of things. I think law enforcement's obviously a heck of a lot more aware of it. I think that the medical community is. I think the mental health community is. I think citizens are. And unfortunately, this tragedy is. But this is the focus, and it's not a surprise, but it's I think a combination of a lot of factors. From a law enforcement perspective, I think people are a lot more aware of what this is and what the circumstances are that they're dealing with, where this should be applied.
Well, ever since the law was enacted, what feedback have you heard from your troopers in terms of the applicability and ease of applying for this yellow flag?
I think for a while it was very, and it's a cumbersome process. There's some good things about it. Obviously, if you can get weapons away from someone and get them help, there's the win. I think dealing with the medical community initially, before we were able to use SpurWink and that telehealth, the teleconferencing part of it was a real big challenge. But I think it's something that's people are getting more comfortable with and they're using.
And then also, when you did get the order to remove firearms, what leeway do you have to search for? Because obviously you only get what you get. And if the person has one gun at home, but he meanwhile is hiding 15 others at his friend's house.
Yeah, and this is where your investigation comes into play. Who are you dealing with? Are you dealing with, you know, a person that might just have one firearm? Or are you dealing with someone who is a hunter? Or are you dealing with someone who is a gun collector and has multiple firearms everywhere? Or are you dealing with someone who's involved in criminal activity and can have these things anywhere?
So from the state police procedure, that because that's what you folks do, you would not only take the guns away, but only see if there's possibility this person may have more firearms somewhere else that we need to go look for if you're using the yellow flag.
Yeah, and I think the investigation, you talk to family and friends and you find out that, you know, there's a gun safe somewhere else, or
then you would go there.
There's multiple properties. Yeah, you would have to do your due diligence as an investigator.
And you would have no hesitance to apply for search warrant if you feel there's a place where you think the gun's hidden, but you just can't get there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And deferring to family to remove weapons, as opposed to, trying to enact a yellow flag or to get a weapons restriction order. Are there pros and cons to that in your perspective?
Yeah, I think there's the obvious ones that you're relying on families to, like, are they completely on board with this? Are they secure at a family member's house? And we had an incident in Bowdoin not too long ago where 4 people were murdered and those are from firearms inside the home. That, the person was able to gain access to. I think that it really depends on the circumstances, but, it's an issue.
I've been around long enough to remember when family members were relied upon more regularly. And then yellow flag, I think, allows the police to confiscate and store weapons in a way that places family members at less vulnerability to pressure from.
You saw it a lot years ago with protection orders where
Exactly.
there was a weapons relinquishment on those. And it was a common practice to say, just give them to
Dad.
uncle or whoever, and they're gonna take them and they'll hold on to them to the court process is over with. And again, that's worked in a lot of cases, but it's that one case it doesn't work, it becomes a problem. If they're at a state police facility or a law enforcement facility, then the access isn't there, and that's the intent of this.
So when you take the guns away, you put it in your safekeeping. You don't say, hey, a family member say, I can keep those guns for him instead. You don't say, okay, you just take that. You actually take possession of those firearms, right?
I believe in our cases, we're taking
Okay.
possession of all of those, and I mean, there could be a circumstance if it's a family member that's mine,
Yeah.
and they're able to show that this is theirs, like,
Okay.
people that
But you
share
don't-
gun. But we, and I think most law enforcement practices are, they'll take the guns and they put it in their evidence lockers, which in some instances are overflowing with these things.
Thank you.
So Carolyn, when we first spoke, which was 7 hours ago, you indicated that the work of the state police was ongoing in terms of work after incidents review. What are the next steps?
Right now, we want to make sure that all of the material is gone to the commission. And then I think we want to see what the commission is going to do. We want to make sure that I don't want to have an after action that says, this is all the things we did great, and the commission says, oh, no, you didn't. I want to make sure that out of respect to you folks and what this commission is supposed to be doing. But that doesn't mean we just sit idly by. There are things that we look at internally that we say, we can do better, and only we that know some of these things. There's some of the bigger picture items that certainly the commission will take a look at and will respect whatever those recommendations are and implement them. But there's things that we're doing now that we speak out on you heard Lieutenant Stevenson earlier about purchasing another type of dog. And it spawns other questions like, well, what if we were in this scenario or this scenario? You know what? Maybe it's time we go out and buy that piece of equipment. We go out and buy this piece of equipment. And when was the last time we updated training on something? It really sparks a discussion. So that's what we're going to be doing in the meantime until the commission is done with their work. And then we will do some type of after action review that's more comprehensive, particular to our agency. But I would never want to do that without incorporating the commission's work into it.
And that continuing work, I think you said that you would be looking to outside resources to assist you.
Yes.
Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah, whether we bring a particular group in, we get offers all the time, and I'm, everything from the wellness side of it to from the operational side to it. I would really have to be careful on who we brought in, and that I wanted to make sure that they know who we are and what type of agency that we are. Someone that comes in that does work for an agency that has 2,600 troopers is not gonna do it for us. I want to make sure that it's a good fit, and that will come with time. But this is something we'll be reviewing for quite some time.
And I've heard reference from some of your other witnesses today to their having benefited from the response to other of these mass shootings, such as the Boston Marathon case and whatnot. How, if at all, do you feel that your examination of what went on in this case can be of benefit to law enforcement nationally? Because this was such a unique incident in this.
I see opportunities to present it at trainings and at other forums. You know, there's a lot of things that I go to or our command staff goes to, or that we have. We bring law enforcement officials into the state. This would be one of those cases that we would present. And just to educate the law enforcement. And I've had people come up to me, how did you do this? Or how did you work through that? I think that's the great way to do it. An after action review or this commission's work, that publication would certainly be a very important document. I know once this was well underway, I'm like, I'm going to read up on as many of these as I can. And I think, you know, everyone should go out there and explore. I've read them in the past, but unfortunately, these are happening quite frequently, and there's a lot of after actions. And some are very similar and some are very, very different. And I think it would be important for us to prepare ourselves for the ones that are different. You know, we know what we did here. We've got a pretty good idea what we have to do to improve it. But what about the next one that comes in that we haven't thought about before? That's what these guys in the back do. This is what they do. They do risk assessment. They go to trainings and they bring up these scenarios. And they've been questioned, why are you guys doing that? That's 3 days of training. This is what they're doing. And that's important. I think it's important for all agencies to engage in that kind of work.
And will your after action review ultimately result in a written product?
It may, what we've done,
Publicly available?
if there's a written product, I think that we would make that publicly available, yeah.
One of the things that always frustrates me, because I've been involved in a few disaster exercises, is that they only do the moment it happens and then that's it. And stuff they can control, which never happens in real life. So I think this instance serves to show how deeply you folks are involved, not just the response with the, you know, the guns and stuff like that, but everything else from human service side to victim identification, to even like the work that you folks do for over days. I think it changes how people plan these exercises in terms of consequence management. Maybe that's a word I'm looking for. It's like what to do afterwards, because the licensed sirens is the easy part sometimes. But this other stuff is the stuff that just really makes it hard for everybody.
And I've had conversations with Major Gosselin about, you know, the next time we have a planned event, maybe bringing more of our law enforcement partners in and say, you know, this is the setup that we have. This is the planned event. And there's other things that we can do to kind of work with each other, to expose each other to different things. Because I think that's a big part of this too, is, you know, incident management is conceptually, I think my first day in the academy, I had a class on it. But when you really put it into practice, and a couple of us have talked about it, when you become the incident commander, when you're a lieutenant and you're living through a plan. I had a person that fell out of a parachute and we were looking for him for a couple of days in Lebanon. We set up ICS, and that was really my first real experience from the upper management side. And it was a great experience. You really got to see how it worked and why it worked and the necessity of it. Whereas a road trooper, not that I didn't care, but I didn't care. I mean, it's just the perspective of it.
One other thing I'd like to mention, our analysts at the crime lab, they were able to match the 308 rifle that was found in the Subaru to both casings at the bowling alley and at Schmenge's, as well as bullets as well. And with the Smith & Wesson M&P 40, they also matched the casing that was found in the trailer to that M&P 40 40 caliber handgun, as well as the bullet that was recovered from the side of the trailer. That was also matched to the gun.
So,
Go ahead.
getting back to the body in the trailer, Sergeant Bryant, you were in CID for a number of years, and that meant homicide investigations. Is that right?
Yeah.
And And so you're familiar with the appearance of a body after a gunshot wound.
Yes.
Was there anything about the blood, for example, that showed that it was there for a long time, longer than a day? But that there was.
It's very hard to age blood. How
Hard
long,
to,
very hard to determine how long blood's been there based on temperature and humidity and all sorts of other factors.
was there any odor of decomposition at all?
No,
And no, any insect life or anything else that was present to suggest the body had been there for a long time?
nothing remarkable like that, you know.
Pardon me?
Nothing remarkable like that, no.
But ultimately, time of death is something that can only be estimated by the medical examiner's office.
Correct.
Colonel, I probably should resist asking this question, but I can't. In the immediate aftermath, while the search was still going on, there was a local law enforcement officer who complained publicly about management by the state police. And I'm sure you were made aware of that. Did any law enforcement supervisors that were working in this investigation complain to you about a lack of information being given to them? The supervisors, chiefs, so on.
I don't think anyone, well, I had on Friday, the 27th, I did a Teams meeting for local chiefs and sheriffs. And at the command post, someone had, one of the neighbors had mentioned to me that some of the local police departments or sheriffs felt that they weren't being used enough. And I said, well, let's, are they at the command post? Let's talk about it. Said, let's just do a Zoom call or a Teams. I think it was a Microsoft Teams call. Got on the Teams call with them, brought them up to speed on what was happening with Robert Card, which was just kind of an extension of the briefing that we had given earlier. Kind of keeping the line of communication going, making sure that those relationships are there. Because you know what, when this is over, we're gonna be in their town for a homicide or something. So it's important for us to keep those relationships. But for the most part, I think they were very supportive of what we were doing. And if anyone needed anything, I had my uniform on in the command post. And there were a lot of chiefs and sheriffs, and certainly all of the federal people were there at the command post. If anyone needed anything, I was in constant contact with multiple conversations with all of them throughout the duration of this. And so, I mean, like, we get it. People maybe don't like how we did things or how we do things. That's fine. But overall, I think we have a very good working relationship with police management in the state.
And the particular officer who wrote that, did that officer's supervisor ever complain to you about a lack of information?
I mean, complain to me directly now.
Or did you get a complaint indirectly through other people involved?
We spoke about it with the supervision at that department. And we're working fine with them now. It's one of those things that we're gonna move past it because it is what it is, and it was their opportunity to fix things, and that's really on them, not us.
Well, having listened to so many of you all day today, it's hard for me to understand the basis for the complaint at this point.
Thank you.
I'm aware of the time, honest to God, but I would like to just hear briefly from the tactical team folks about the issue we raised about given how much unspent ammunition was in the trailer, sort of how they go about safely accessing the trailer with.
I'm not sure that they want to tell you how they go about safely doing it.
It's like operationally sensitive, you don't have to, but I'm interested in knowing that.
It would be very challenging without knowing that there was somebody in there. If we knew somebody was in there, we heard, a bump or a movement in there, obviously we would approach that very differently. And we have tools to open up that trailer without going up to that trailer. But without knowing that, it would have been exactly what it looked like that day, and it would have been bad.
You opened up trailers, not knowing whether there was a live person in there or not,
Yes.
an armed live person in there or not. So, presumably this is what you're trained to do, but just seems like the risk is high.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
Not a question.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absent, there's just, without knowing for sure, I mean, it's a very timely, painstaking process to deconstruct all those trailers without knowing that there's somebody in there. So really the only option is opening the door and setting yourself up in the best tactical position to respond to what's there when you open it.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe that concludes our afternoon. And certainly want to thank those who have been here today for your presence and your cooperation. And I want to thank, once again, ASL interpreters. I used to watch when I was a trial judge long ago. I used to watch the court reporters, and I was always more concerned about giving them a chance to rest than anybody else in the room. But now it's the ASL interpreters are going through a harder role than the court reporters were. So I'm sensitive to that, but we really have to go forward, and they do a great job. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I got it.